She's a consensus ambassador and all around extraordinaire with coding and design. Yeah, we're really excited to be speaking with you guys here today. Wish we could be there in person and experience the culture and all the things that Europe has offered. But for now, we're doing it remote and we'll do it vicariously. So today we're going to present a cool project that we were working on, hacking on a little bit recently, and pretty interesting stuff. So this package right here, you guys want to follow along. The way it'll work out is I'll kind of go over what is Ethereum, kind of have some sense making to understand what this thing is. And then from there, we can go in and actually look at the code to how to connect to Web3. Fun fact, some of the code is still in the works. So bonus points for those that can sit down and figure it out with us, because that's the workshop part of it. Sort of like live in the zone. Without further ado, I will start the presentation part of our talk. So deep dive in the code front end. We'll figure this out later. We'll add this to you. Stay tuned. Give this a watch. Give this a star. Stay tuned for updates on this. We expect to be updating this actually more along the way. Why? Because, well, we believe we want to give you as much bang for your buck as possible and have some sort of repo that lives, and hopefully encourage people to contribute to this repository so that it's not something that's a one-off. It's something you can kind of star on your desktop or on your browser and just continue to see how have a really good place to see in a hands-on way how to use React, Web3 and Metamask and all the amazing things. Great. So just a quick introduction into like what is Web3 and what are blockchains. Blockchains seem to be very hard, right? Like, because they're at the nexus of all of these different things, from like monetary policy to game theory to elections to, like what is efficient investment, to what is democracy and community, to what is actually value, what is valuable. Is Dogecoin or Mongoose coin or Snake coin, or you pick your coin. Is there any value in these things? To even national security and like with cryptography, espionage and all these things. And blockchain seems to be in this middle ground right here, where it combines a lot of these ideas in different realms, economics, politics, cryptography, and distributed systems, to create something that we call the internet of value, the internet of assets, right? This is kind of different from the internet of information in the sense that Web 1 allowed us to have HTML to present information, right? And Web 2 allowed us to kind of style it a little bit. And then we had like interactivity with JavaScript. And over time, the last couple of years, from 1995 till now, we saw JavaScript go from small little snippets of code to then eventually larger snippets, to then being so unsustainable, you had to create, let's say, frameworks for it and libraries. And we have React now, right? In the sense that we realize the power of JavaScript. You see snippets of code that people start to realize how to make higher and higher and higher order abstractions to create new functionality for people. And it's like an amazing thing. The internet of information, Web 1 allowed you to get information. Web 2.0 allowed you to interact with that information. And Web 3.0 allows you to sort of commoditize trust and really fulfill the promise of decentralization. Because the internet, the idea was to have a decentralized network, but the ways it was designed, it necessarily didn't allow for like for a scaling up to like billions of people. So Web 3 basically allows us to get away from centralized servers to decentralized networks. In a sense, the key innovation of blockchains is two things. First of all, a blockchain is a database and a network rolled into one, which is kind of interesting because you either have a network or a database. But blockchains is a cool saying from Vinay Gupta, which was wherever there's a network, there's data, and wherever there's data, there's a network, which leads to some interesting things. A blockchain's key innovation is that it commoditizes trust. So trust is like the hardest thing to have in the world, right? Like you go down the street, for the most part, you trust that the cars are going to stop at the red light. If you deal with your banking system, for the most part, you think that, they're not going to take your money and run away from it. But like, how do you trust random people on the internet in an open and adversarial environment? It's very difficult to actually do that. Before that, we had gatekeepers and centralized servers because they served as sort of proxies for trust, right? The bank, you don't necessarily lend your money to a random person in the street. The bank does it for you. They suss out good investment opportunities and give you a return. You trust your representative because, you know, you try going to, let's say, a restaurant with like 50 people and trying to split the check. That's a problem, right? So imagine doing splitting the check of society with millions of people in commons. So this idea of commoditizing trust, of trust being almost like electricity, or trust being almost like water, is a really key essential thing for blockchain. So that's the killer app, actually. The fact that you have this platform by which you can create arbitrary scripts that allow for commoditizing trust and allowing for coordination between different people in open and adversarial environments. So you have a platform with HTML to like share information, the Gutenberg Press. You have a platform to have interactions with people anywhere in the world. That's Web 2.0. Now you have a platform to basically trust people and coordinate with them over things that are valuable and open environments where no one actually identifies themselves. That's a massively powerful idea that we're starting to see the implications of. Today, the smart contracts, which we get into, are very small snippets of code. But I think in 10 years' time and 20 years' time, I'll follow the same path of JavaScript, where it was initially small bits of code, and inevitably we started to see this like kind of like this higher levels of abstraction, and then this Cambrian explosion of all these amazing things you can do. So what is Ethereum? Well, once you understand what a blockchain is, you just take this thing to the next step, and you say, well, Ethereum is the leading programmable blockchain. So Bitcoin is a blockchain, but it's like email. There's a limited script on there, but you can't really do a lot of things on it. Blockchains allow developers to leverage the security of Ethereum. And we'll get into this a little bit later. There's a little typo here. If you want to understand kind of like how Ethereum fits into the evolution of the internet, this document right here, this article, it's a little long, but it's actually, it will change your mind. Shout out to Vinay Gupta. And it's amazing to see how we evolved from like the magic of SQL to then like, data and networks, and wherever there's data, there's networks. The history of computing is also really good. It shows you how the history of computing from like, the microprocessor all the way down to like its logical conclusion, or at least its logical point now in history, blockchain networks. So Web3 is not antithetical to Web 2. It's in a way allows for a new layer of features that developers can kind of leverage, especially front-end developers, because it's actually pretty easy to interact with Web3. Your front end's not going to change much. So what is Web3? Web 2, again, referred to the vision of the internet that most of us know today, but the internet is dominated by a few companies that own your data. Web 3, in the context of Ethereum, refers to decentralized applications that run on a blockchain. It allows anybody to participate without monetizing your personal information, but it goes beyond that. Like I said, JavaScript allows you to have interactivity. Solidity and Ethereum allow you, and other smart contracting languages allow you to have collaboration, ownership, and decentralizing like kind of the internet in a real way where you eventually commoditize networks, and we'll get into what that means. A great podcast that kind of puts everything into perspective is by an Ethereum researcher called Justin Drake, called Moon Math. It's probably one of the best podcasts I've heard. It's highly regarded. It goes from the basis of cryptography all the way to like an application, and describes this thing called crypto economics, which is like the key to understanding how you can create decentralized networks without a coordinator. The same way, like, some people, we'll get into that later. Why is Ethereum so special? From perspective of economic perspective, you can think of Ethereum and smart contract platforms commoditizing networks. So Amazon Web Services is a proprietary network, right? Like Amazon owns AWS and you use AWS, right? You can't fork AWS, right? Jeff Bezos won't allow it, and there's like physical infrastructure. Google, their networks, or Bloomberg, like their networks are owned by a company, and they are you have to deal with them. Commoditization is really important because it helps drive standardization, lowers costs, and allows for innovation. So Ethereum does, it commoditizes the network, it commoditizes the database between all these networks. It commoditizes the business logic in the form of smart contracts. It commoditizes the data generated by the contracts, since blockchains have open data. So it commoditizes the security, the network, the data, and even the machines, because in order to mine or process transactions on a blockchain, doesn't really matter. Like, you can have the supercomputer, you can have a regular computer, as long as it meets the criteria of what you need for the network. You can go into the network and you can leave the network, and one machine is the same as the other machine, right? It's all about hash power. So in that form, you're able to have this open permissionless network where people can agree upon value And then what sorts of things can you do, right? So what it does is that Ethereum has all the stuff that it commoditizes, and it provides these security guarantees for anybody that builds upon it. So it commoditizes trust between people. And there's a highly regarded talk, I think, from Gavin Wood, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, and what he means about commoditizing trust. The brilliance of smart contract platforms is that it extends commodities to any programmable logic made by anyone. So you don't have to create the network. You can just build upon other people's things. And there's no data lock-in. The amazing part is that with Ethereum, like if I build something that's amazing, let's say a money market that is decentralized and it's real time and updates every 15 seconds, then you don't have to ask me for permission the same way you would have to ask for a Web2 company's permission to do something with it. Famous cases like kind of Twitter. Twitter used to have a really good API for developers, but eventually they shut off access. And then a lot of companies were left in the dark, and all their investment, all their time was gone. With Ethereum, these contracts, once they're up there, they're immutable. You can't really shut them down. So if you make an investment into like having an API that pulls from some sort of data set, you can rest assured that that's not going to be pulled, right? You can make those investments. You can build those things. If I create an interest rate protocol based on money markets, you can then create something on top of it for like, like derivatives, or for no loss lotteries, where people can basically win the interest rate of a pooled amount of money somewhere, or anything you can think of. Honestly, there's a really cool idea of like what are public goods and what are private goods. Is really important. We can get into that later, but it's kind of out of the scope of this talk. What's a smart contract? Smart contracts are just like JavaScript in some ways. They're snippets of code that, instead of running on a server, run on this network database, right? Blockchains, you can think of it as a network database. So there's just snippets of code that run on this database that also happens to be a network. And their uses are basically limited by your imagination. You can create money markets, you can issue royalties, you can have ownership for art, you can even have video games on them. There's certain blockchains that the speed is getting really good, and you're able to basically now start doing a very rudimentary deep learning on the blockchain itself through StarkNet. So smart contracts allow you to connect to an internet native value infrastructure and incentivize collaboration. The hardest part in any network or startup is to bootstrap sort of people using your network. But when you give people ownership of that network from the get-go, and you give people incentives to kind of collaborate on that network, you see a whole different dynamic. And it really helps kind of bootstrap a network once you know that the machines are commoditized, the security is commoditized, even the data between the applications is commoditized. Because if somebody uses one application in Ethereum, they can come to your application with the data already there. It's pretty amazing. So what is Metamask? Metamask is the leading crypto wallet and the portal to this thing we call the Internet of Value, the Internet of Assets. There's regular Internet of Information, and it's permissionless, and no one owns the internet. Same with Ethereum. It basically, this shared database maintains value across different people. And MetaMask now is trusted by over 21 million users worldwide, and allows people to start exploring the blockchain applications in seconds. These things are called dapps. Dapps, we'll get into what they are, but they're regular front ends. And instead of connecting to, let's say, a regular database, they can also connect to this added layer of internet native value transfer called a blockchain, right? MetaMask, you can think of it almost like a portal to the internet of value, the same way Google Chrome is the portal to the internet of information. MetaMask is the most permissionless and extensible wallet in the ecosystem. And we're aiming to be the most decentralized and community-focused wallet. And when you think wallet, just think portal to the internet of application of blockchain applications. Why specifically wallets? Because they hold your keys, right? So they hold this very special sort of cryptographic keys that allows you to own something. In some ways, you can think about it kind of philosophically in the sense that if you can't own something or keep something secret, then it's not really yours, right? So MetaMask allows you to keep your secrets the same way you can keep, let's say, your banking information. You may love your friends, but you're not going to share your banking information with them, right? There's certain things that need to be secret, like you may love your family, but you're not, well, your family, I guess we can share your social security number or government ID number, but like certain sensitive information about, your financial accounts, you're not really going to share. So, that MetaMask allows you to like have those cryptographic primitives in a safe and secure and decentralized way. And that's really key because if you kind of give ownership to these special keys to a third party, If that third party is hacked, then, well, your secrets are gone, right? But if you have if you're responsible and you're able to hold these private keys in a certain way and not share them, then MetaMask really facilitates you holding these things and actually owning something, right? You can use MetaMask, and there's APIs for many things like signing requests. You can use MetaMask as a single sign-on. You can use it to sign legal documents and encrypt and decrypt messages with your private keys. So you can send encrypted messages. You can easily add custom networks. So if Ethereum is very expensive, you can use other networks like Polygon or Optimism or Arbitrum. Why do we use a MetaMask for the end user and the developer? For the end user, it's a portal to this internet of value, NFTs, decentralized money markets, stable coins. So you can have, access to basically the equivalent of dollars and the stable economic policy of a dollar by proxy, and any sort of thing you can think of. You can have governance. There was a decentralized autonomous organization called the DAO that was trying to buy the U.S. Constitution, which was very funny. In a couple of weeks, they raised, I think it was like $30 or $40 million equivalent, and made a almost successful bid. So it's a lot of ways where you can kind of collaborate with people over value, assets, and what you believe in, your values. It's great because MetaMask allows you to interact with over 50,000 dapps and growing. Every day there's new dapps being created. So great, yeah, that's amazing. It's a decentralized key management system, helping you to own and control your keys and what you think is valuable. We'll see how we can connect to MetaMask, to the Ethereum network or other Ethereum compatible networks through MetaMask. We'll look into like some of the APIs and quick overview. We explain what smart contracts are. There's a lot of examples here. Truffle is basically a way to develop smart contracts as a development environment for the Ethereum virtual machine based blockchains. So put some information down here of what is the Ethereum virtual machine. Basically, it's a blockchain with a world computer running on it. So it's a blockchain that allows you to compute things in a certain manner. And then what's Ether.js? Ethers.js is just an easy way to access, interact with the blockchain without having to do a lot of hard things, right? Like it's convenience methods. If you want to learn more about Dapp development, we have this like rabbit hole we're going to constantly be updating. Obviously, the best place is Consensus to see up-to-date articles and find experts from everything from like anything across the blockchain. We're pretty good and experts in. If you want to kind of get really good overview of like NFTs and DeFi and from a high level, Metamask is a great place to start. Two industry publications are the Defiant and Bankless. They're great to keep day to day. Bankless has a lot of good strategy guides, and so does Defiant. A lot of good documentaries, so you can actually understand this thing. The best way to get involved is just being part of the community. The same way the best part about being a React developer is being part of the community, like events like this, which are special, and I look forward to constantly. If you really want to get started later, Truffle's Pet Shop, Crypto Zombies, Littered by example. I tried to order these things in sort of complexity from easiest to then eventually hardest, and then documentation. If you understand how Ethereum works, from easiest to hardest, depending if you like to read or you like to build things hands-on. If you want to go big brain mode, you can go to Mega Brain Vitalik Buterin's website, where he discusses a lot of amazing things. If sort of research and the cutting edge is your thing, you can check out eth.research. And they're discussing the most cutting edge of Ethereum. And it's kind of fun to go down these rabbit holes. They're pretty cool. The thing about blockchains is that they offer something to everyone, whether you love design, whether you love economics, whether you love a combination of those, whether you love people and community building, whether you love good UX, UI. And this Web3 ecosystem, there's something for everybody. And it's global, it's international, it's full of amazing, beautiful people who share the values of creating new things and being proud that you built it and being at the cutting edge of technology. So yeah, that's kind of the general gist of it. If you're really interested into the art and science of creating decentralized networks, there's an idea called crypto economics. It's basically the art and study of securing applications through economic incentives. And that idea is the ability allows you to have a decentralized network without a central coordinator that can make security guarantees and guarantees about application performance. which is a very interesting idea that is working out today. There's a lot of projects that use this idea. Ethereum allows you to basically use this new type of art and science to create decentralized networks. And that's about it. And if you're really interested in like what it is to design a token, is this, but it goes from like least complex to very complex. So yeah, that's kind of the general gist of it. We're happy to take questions and have a kind of like just any questions right now in the chat for a minute or so, and then from there we're going to get into the actual front end and how to like jump in and work with Ethereum hands-on. So I don't know if people can speak and ask questions now, or if it's possible that you want to chat. You guys let me know.
Yeah, if anyone does want to speak up and ask a question, that's totally okay. Just open up your mic and try not to talk over anyone else. But yeah, anyone have a question?
Yeah, don't be shy. It's okay. You can type it as well if you're shy. You don't want to be on the internet.
Also, let us know in the chat if any of you guys were in Notter's workshop. That might be interesting to know. But yeah, if there's no other questions, we'll give it a second.
Going once, going twice. No questions. Okay, well, seems to be no questions. Feel free to join the consensus Discord, which I'll post later. Reach out to me on Twitter, Tesla809, or on the consensus Discord. More than happy to help you on this journey to learn about Ethereum, because it's not just a one-off thing. It's an amazing sort of community that the more you go, the more there is, and the more exciting it is. So if you're really into sort of like the web as it is today, there is an amazing sort of new world out there that is extremely exciting, and it gets me motivated to stay up at night and program and hang out with my friends who do the same thing. And yeah, it's I think one of the best communities out there on the internet. So without further ado, we'll let Dina present kind of the front end and how to interact with this. The difference between truffle and hard hat. Okay, now the questions are pouring in. The difference between truffle and hard hat, they both are basically tool sets to develop and maintain smart contracts for Ethereum based blockchains. Truffle came out first. Hard hat's a new competitor. It really depends on how you like the API surface. Truffle is well maintained. It has a lot of good documentation on the internet. So in that sense, you can find a lot of your answers quickly if you do Google search. Hard hat has a lot of benefits as well. They're built, you can use TypeScript with it and have this thing called ethers.js, which you can use with it as well. It really depends. You can use either or to get the job done, but do you use them and you'll find out which one you like the best. How important is it to learn Yule regarding midterm Solidity developer path? I would say that learning how the contracts compile is probably more important than learning a new language. If the order of languages I would learn would be Solidity, Scribble, which is a basically specification language that allows you to fuzz your contract to make sure that what you wrote is actually what's being turned into assembly and on the blockchain, right? And then after that, it would be Viper. It's Python-like. If you like Python, caveat with Viper, you can't necessarily import. There's no inheritance with Viper, but it's still an interesting language. Yule, is it super important? I'm not sure. I would focus on maybe learning how sort of the EVM works and how stacks work, and like what are the opcodes. Because if you understand that, then any smart contract language that comes out, you'll be able to grow pretty quickly. So if you want to do midterm, understanding the best practices for Solidity, understanding the common attack patterns, and you can do ether knots or capture the ether to know these things and figure those things out. Any more questions? I guess you can't, you can definitely type in chat. I'll answer it during chat. You can ask these questions during chat, and Dina can start her presentation, and then I'll answer any questions related to this thing. Okay, so Dina will share her screen, and then we'll get to it.
So let me get that going. All right, so we decided to build a Web3 workshop with friends. That was the whole idea of our little Dapp. You'd be able to buy tickets. Those tickets would be NFTs. They would cost 1 ETH instead of being completely free, but it's tested, so it doesn't really matter. It's imaginary internet money, according to Ganache and Truffle. So we created this repo, this with npx create React app. If you look at the directory structure, I have the contracts here, which we get when we run Truffle in it. We have images here, migrations, whenever we might do Truffle compile and then Truffle migrate. We have source with assets, constants with transaction feedback. That's going to be important later on for transaction states. Then we have our context file, reducer, more components here, like connect button, Metamask button, and account, which is actually going to get super interesting because we have React JazzaCon in there. Then if you look at the packages that we have installed, we have Metamask, the tech provider. We have Open Zeppelin contracts. We have Truffle. I have styled components here, Framer Motion, React JazzaCon, and ethers. So we're doing this completely from scratch, even though scaffold.eth exists. And that just goes to show that like, you don't have to start from anywhere. You could just sort of throw these packages in your repo and just go get up and going, basically. So let's go fire this up in Safari. And it does not work. This was intended. This was intended. Sad trombone, but this was intended. And the reason why is because Safari is the only browser that I don't have Metamask installed on. And it's looking for something. If we refresh it, Metamask wasn't detected. Ethereum is false. What exactly were we looking for? Well, if I throw this on Firefox, you'll see that we get this massive object here, right? And this massive object is basically the provider API that MetaMask, along with other browser wallets, injects into your browser window. And this gives us access to a bunch of things like what network am I on? What is the selected address? So what account am I currently connected with? Also gives us access to methods like request, enable, and send. And also tells us a chain ID, and we'd actually be able to even get our balance from it. So now that we have this connected on an actual browser that has MetaMask installed, right, we're going to go switch over to our context because this is where things get really important. Over here, I'm creating a context for a Web3 provider that I'm going to wrap index.js in at some point. And we're also using dispatch because our state is going to start to get incredibly complex that on top of context, just managing it with use state would be a little tedious. So now we're going to want to be able to use reducer instead. So we even have initial state here too. And I have it as an object at first, and you'll see I have a loading state, but I won't set that. But I have is connected, I have network, I have chain ID, I have provider. And then I have user with an address and a balance. And then we have transaction feedback too. So now when we go to the context, right? Let's start from connect provider. Is this big enough for everyone to see? I'm gonna check in the chat.
Make it a little bigger.
Huh?
I'm blind. I'm sorry.
No worries. Ah, yes, there we go. That's what I was looking for.
Hey. I think it works.
Oh my God. Why does Adam do this?
Why, Adam?
Adam is taking an L this time.
That's good. That's a bad thing. Yeah.
Okay, so I have my first function here, right? We want to connect the provider, and this is going to run every single time that this loads. So first we want to grab the provider, right? And this is using the window.ethereum, the Ethereum, the provider API that we got earlier. And if that exists, let's go get the signer because we're going to need to be able to sign transactions. Then from there, we can also, this is also using ethers. From there, we can also get the network, and then we can destructure and get name and the chain ID. And then we're going to dispatch, right? We're going to update our state just like that. And then brief pause, right? We've connected the network. All these things are in place. What's next? You'll notice that like if you've ever interacted with a Dapp before, you refresh and you're still connected, you're still there. It's not that it's held in local storage, but rather every single time you refresh, this gets called over and over, at least every single time that you refresh it. But this checks, maybe you've interacted with this dApp before. You've already given permission for this dApp to view your accounts, and maybe even you've given it permission to have an allowance for a spend limit for a certain ERC20 token. This will always update that, it'll always show it, but just in case we haven't done it, just in case we haven't connected before, we'd be able to have access to a connect function where instead of saying request the ETH accounts, just method ETH accounts that have already been connected, let's actually request the accounts. And we're gonna pass that into our connect button. And the logic for that is basically take the balance. We're going to ask for what the balance is of the selected account. And then we're also going to take the selected account, which is going to be the first account in that array. And then we're going to dispatch a connect user. So then you're going to see, this is why I also didn't add a loading state by design totally, but I wanted to show it like the flicker of like install MetaMask to connect to then suddenly we've connected. So I've got this going here. And then we're going to go just like that. And now we have access. Now we're connected. We have a Jazz account. Our address is shortened, but it's there. It's the exact one, right? And now we want to be able to Now we want to be able to buy tickets. This is where like the functionality could definitely use a lot of help. But where do we start?
So to provide some context to answer Manuel's question, so the purpose of the application is just to buy a simple NFT. This NFT will represent a ticket. Let's say you want to buy a ticket for an event or something like that. The cool thing about this is that all the payment happens on an internet native infrastructure, and you're using MetaMask to sort of act as your wallet, right? You're able to pay almost the equivalent to paying cash. To attend some sort of, to buy some sort of asset that then lets you go to some sort of event. So instead of having to go through Eventbrite with a few lines of code, you can create something equivalent to Eventbrite that has as much, if not greater security, right? And it's pretty cool. And we're basically seeing how we can connect Ethereum, and then we're seeing how we can, where we're gonna manage state, which is like the core thing we wanna focus on. Like, okay, how do you connect to this internet of assets? And then where do we manage state? How do we go about this? And how do we make a fun app in a day? I mean, it was like a mini hackathon between me and Dina, and it was probably the most fruitful thing I've done in a while. So in a quick amount of time, we were able to create something pretty cool with React and then leverage basically something that has beyond bank level security to create something that was pretty fun,
Where do we go from here?
Hey, can I say something real quick? I just wanted to say that like I've been digging into Web3 lately, and I've downloaded a lot of apps to try and kind of figure out kind of how to build the UI around, MetaMask, etc. So I'm looking at this, and I've actually got the code open here, and this is like one of the more involved React applications that I've seen. So, most people here are React developers. I really suggest that you guys pull this thing down and tear it apart, because there is a lot of cool stuff in here that I don't see in a lot of other demo applications out of there. Yeah, just wanted to say that. Very, very awesome, guys. And if you built it in a day, that's really cool.
Yeah, all credit. All credit goes to Dina. Also, like, there's a lot of interesting Easter eggs in there, so play around.
Yeah, even the transaction modal, like the second we get that connected to the contract, this is something that was always important. Something that also gets covered in the UX and blockchain webinar in the README, that like you should be relying on wallet interactions for user experience, because it's great, but this offers so much more detail. Instead of looking at just addresses, they're like externally on content or even transaction hashes. Did I mention that? So now you have a little more context to what your transaction is.
Oh, it seems to be that Harry's phone is open.
I think I got him muted. I was trying to track him down. There we go. I think We're good.
No worries. But
It happens.
yeah.
Yeah, no worries. It's okay. It's all fun. It's all fun.
Yeah. And then where else do we go from here? Should we try to put something together?
Yeah. So like let's take a pause and then questions. I know definitely there's some code on here. Questions from the participants. Because I know there's like a lot of we have atoms, we have molecules, we have these organisms. And then we look at the utils inside of index.js and app.js. Questions from the folks on sort of the general connection. Let's actually look at app.js, right? And we'll look into app.js inside of the, what do you call it? The source?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, awesome. And it's kind of cool because I know you guys are all familiar with this. We have these global styles. Dina, what'd you use for the global styles?
I use styled components.
Nice.
Well, yeah, styled components.
Beautiful. Yeah, right. So we have styled components, and that's pretty straightforward. So as you can see, your development flow for the front end stays mostly the same. Using Ethereum doesn't require you to change a lot of your workflow, actually. Like you can use the only things you really have to worry about is like how to connect to the Ethereum network with Metamask. What is required to move an app to TypeScript? Oh, that's a great question, Mark. First is knowing TypeScript, setting up the TypeScript transpiler, and there's really no real requirement related to Ethereum to actually move on to TypeScript. The majority of as decentralized applications, honestly, are front end and testing. Actually, the smallest surface on your code is going to be Solidity. And in some ways, it's by design early on, because think of the implication of having a lot of code in something that is not well tested, that holds money. There could be a hack and all that other stuff. So I would say 90% of your code is going to be front end. So Ether.js is written in TypeScript. Yep, there you go. So in terms of like the thing that you would need, you would make sure that you would have like a library that allows you to connect to Ethereum that is supported by TypeScript. One is Ethers.js. So just making sure that your calls related to calling the contract is supported by a library that uses TypeScript. That's like the biggest thing. Beyond that, there really isn't anything. And then also when you have, let's say, either Truffle or Hardhat, making sure that your tool chain works well with TypeScript.
One thing I would add is that, like he said, the majority of your app here is a React application. You've got all of the React components created in JavaScript. If you wanted to move over to TypeScript, it is just a superset of JavaScript. So just like if you have CSS files and you can turn them into SCSS files, you can do them like one at a time and kind of start moving one component over at a time. And then, of course, whatever part of the app that's JavaScript that's interacting with your contracts, you would just need to make sure that that's possible. But as far as the React app goes, it would just be like converting any other React app to TypeScript. And you could do it one component at a time if you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the majority of your code is going to be the front end, actually. So if you feel very comfortable with the front end, the surface area to actually learn about Ethereum is actually very small. You can even create dapps or front ends for smart contracts that are already deployed. So you can kind of get a sense of how to work with the ecosystem. And then later on, if you want to venture forth and write your own Solidity, then you can do so. So it's great because Ethereum allows you to sort of write custom front ends for this open permissionless database, right? You can't really do that with Facebook or over Twitter. So looking at app.js, right? The real key thing, two key things here is first, actually three key things. First is, your front end is going to stay basically the same, right? The second key thing you have to know is basically how do you sort of connect to Ethereum, which we'll cover, and then how do you kind of manage state. But if used to managing state before, it shouldn't be anything too complex. You're really just okay. I'm trying to run the app locally with Chrome, but I'm a newbie and I have zero ETH. What would you recommend doing? Oh yes, we should add it to the README. You should go to what is it, Paradigm? Well, no, not even. You would need to first install and we'll set this up afterwards. You set up Ganache, and things are a bit blurry. Let's understand how things connect in the low level. I have a MetaMask all of a few networks. What are those networks? Or there's just some sort of branch. Oh, okay, great. So answering the first question, set up Ganache. Just go to trufflesuite.com, do the one-click installer for Ganache, and you should be able to download basically a custom blockchain on your machine. If you go to the Truffle Pet Shop workshop, you'd be able to like kind of figure out exactly how to connect to it. And so it's pretty straightforward. It's just making sure that your config file matches the blockchain you're using. So Udi, you want to understand sort of the low level. First thing with networks, think of Ethereum as a database, right? And there's different types of networks / databases. The main net is the one where the money's worth the most. That's the only place where money's worth anything. Test nets are places where people send contracts in an almost live environment to test things out, right? So a test net like Ropsten testnet or Growly or Rinkeby, these are test networks that allow you to deploy a contract to a public network, but the ETH is not worth anything, right? And they have different levels of syncing the databases, aka different methods of doing so. So if you want something that's more towards the new type of Ethereum that's coming out, you use Growly. If you want something that's a proof of authority much faster, you use Rinkeby. So these are just different instances of a database. If you deploy something to Rinkeby, it's kind of isolated in its own world. If you deploy something into Ropsten, it's its own kind of deployment. So each network allows you to deploy deploy a different instance of the contract. So in terms of like, you have a MetaMask wallet with a few networks inside, what you would do is we would go into Truffle config. Dina, if you want to show Truffle config.
Mm-hmm.
So Truffle config allows you to basically configure the network, right? So we go Truffle config, and then the documentation is pretty robust for Truffle. So you have a development network. 8545 is for this version of Truffle's Ganache one-click blockchain that is a CLI. It's a command line interface. 7545 is for the one with the GUI, which is pretty cool. What you would do is within the networks, you would create one called for Rinkeby, or one for Ropsten, or one for maybe a layer 2, and then add in sort of the information there. In order to connect to a blockchain, you have to have access. If it's on your local machine, then you don't have to have access to a third party. If you want to connect to, let's say, a public testnet, you would sign up for Infura, which is essentially a SaaS service that we provide that lets you connect to the Ethereum network without having to run your own node. If that answers your question. Was it easy? And it was more difficult putting this thing in 24 hours. It was exhilarating.
Fairly exhilarating.
Yeah, it was honestly, the front end was actually the easiest part, which is the lesson learned here is that you can put something together very sophisticated if you're a React developer in a day, right? The hard part was just making sure that your solidity is right. And if you show the solidity contract here, so we have, let's say, Web3 workshop, right? And it looks like JavaScript in some sort of ways, right? And the code is actually very basic. But you can think of, if you're used to like using Java or something like that, or maybe Rust, maybe you're more comfortable with a statically typed language. Solidity has this little, just like JavaScript, it has this little corners that you just have to pick up over time. So the hardest part was really just figuring out, sitting down and writing an efficient contract that didn't have too many vulnerabilities, but honestly just worked. I would say that you will spend, well, if you're learning Ethereum, 90% of your time on the contract, and this contract will be maybe 5% of your code base. And that's okay because you're learning something new. I imagine when you first started learning React, it was like, 90% of your time. And then everything else is like, not that much. So the hardest part was actually the Solidity, connecting everything. Metamask's documentation is actually very straightforward. Obviously, there's things that can be improved, but understanding how to connect to the Ethereum network was pretty easy. Using the same kind of workflow where the React was pretty easy. The hardest part was just really writing the Solidity itself. But this, thankfully, you have friends at the, a meetup. You just Google any meetup related to Solidity, and you should find somebody that you're able to hang out with. ETH Barcelona is coming up soon. If you guys want to check that out. Really just going and checking out these tutorials online are super useful. And just going down the rabbit hole, you'll find a lot of people who will help you with the Solidity part. But as a React developer, honestly, it's very easy.
So I don't know if we wanted to try to answer one of the people's questions a little bit more around, they were asking about how to get the test ETH.
Oh, yeah.
And sure. We posted a link in the chat that was, I think it was the Paradigm link that you were looking for. But basically, you can take your wallet address, your public wallet address, and copy it and put it into that site. And it will give you a plethora of different currencies in effect to be able to test with. So maybe you're building a ticket system, and maybe it takes ETH, Polygon, Mumbai, or not Mumbai, Polygon, and maybe what's another one?
Like here, grow
anything, right? But so
yeah,
that faucet will load you up with a bunch of tokens for all these various tokens, and I guess one other question I had about Truffle is, I know with Hard Hat, like when you spin up like a testnet locally, it'll give you a few accounts with some ETH in it. Does Truffle have something like that? Or
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the way it works is when you spin up a local blockchain, it's like playing with house money. Essentially, it's your own money, right? So in some ways, it pre-fills a bunch of accounts with 100 ETH. The way Ethereum works from the back end is, you see that mnemonic right here? If you could take anything from our talk, and I think this is the thing I always end with and start with and I'm pedantic with, that is basically, it's called mnemonic here, but when you create, let's say, your MetaMask wallet, that's your secret recovery phrase. If you ever get into the space, avoid the costly lesson, never share this. It's called a secret recovery phrase for a reason. Never use this when you're generating from the test networks or from Ganache or from Ganache CLI. And load it to your MetaMask and actually put real ETH in it, right? It's not secure, it's only for testing purposes. So those 12 words right there, what they do is that they get turned with some fancy cryptography to some sort of string or some sort of number, hexadecimal number. That number is used to then generate all your addresses. So that right there generates, technically, and you put an asterisk on it, can generate an unlimited number of addresses. If you go on MetaMask and you just keep on creating account,
send it to yourself.
You can generate a lot of addresses. These are your public addresses. So yeah, if you're spinning up a local blockchain, Ganache allows you to it just sets up a bunch of ETH for you. Same with Hard Hat. For the public networks, they're throttled obviously because apparently some people like to hog a lot of test tokens. So you have to like sometimes figure out some sort of social confirmation or something like that, like this social media account. Yeah, so I would say the benefit of using a local chain, right, is to quickly test things to make sure it's not obviously broken. Then you use a test network to make sure that the timing works out and your UX UI works out, and the way your contract is structured, it works well with the proof of the consensus proof that network has. So if you're looking for like ETH2, eventually you deploy the Rollin to make sure it works with all the assumptions you have. And then once you're good, you may deploy to maybe a layer 2 that's actually not that costly, like Polygon. And then once you're ready for the big leagues, then you deploy to Ethereum mainnet. I say that because it's the most costly one, but it's costly because it's extremely secure. So if you're dealing with a contract, say that doesn't have a lot of interactions, but deals with a lot of value, you go on Ethereum mainnet. If you're building like a blockchain-based game, you can use Binance Smart Chain or Polygon, and that allows you to build something that you can that costs like less than pennies to interact with constantly, and it's very engaging. Okay, so how do you test the whole app? I mean, unit test and end-to-end testing. It was everything manual. Yeah, so we didn't have time since it was a 24-hour hackathon type of thing, but I would say when you write smart contract code, the majority, you want to strive for 100% coverage. So Truffle or Hard Hat, but I know Truffle better, uses Mocha and Chai. So you're able to use Mocha and Chai to create tests for them, like your functions. So it would work exactly the same way as you would do unit tests for your your JavaScript or end-to-end tests for like a large application. So it works exactly the same way, except that you may have if you're using like ethers.js, it's just certain methods that you would use to call the contract. But on the front end, it feels exactly the same. As long as you're familiar with these like basic methods, it feels exactly the same as testing regular code.
Do you want me to pull what
Yeah.
testing like in both of them up? I can show for my bootcamp project, and I can also show for supply chain the exercise.
Yeah, so we can check out testing. Again, the great thing about building on Web3 is that 95% of the way that you work is not going to change, right? It's just basically like writing smart contracts that only changes. It's a new type of thing, really. But beyond that, everything else is the same. So are there end-to-end testings? Are you mocking smart contracts then? Yeah. So Dina can show.
Hard Hat, and then I think it was exercises, was it? Yeah. You want it in code because Adam doesn't like Solidity.
Oh yeah. So if you see this one right here, the first one.
All right.
So if we look at spread test JS, look at these tests. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking at basically two types of tests from two different projects. One of them is just a supply chain smart contract. Another one is an options platform. So it's pretty cool. Like one person can build an entire options platform that can handle billions of dollars. So if you see here, it's kind of the same thing in some ways. You have Hard Hat, you have Chai, you have certain other applications you kind of put in. The flow basically is the same. You have a describe, you set things up before each test, and then you describe something. So like, okay, you go through like, let's say a small unit test for setting up the contract, and then maybe a test, series of tests for placing a bet. And maybe at the end, you have a whole end-to-end test of setting up the contract and placing the bet and closing the bet and all these other things. Dina, can you explain SMOC essentially?
I'm using SMOC to mock a few smart contracts because obviously with the Chainlink aggregator V3 interface, I'm going to need it to give me specific values so I can make sure that my test is always correct because that my tests always pass, I'm sorry, because I want to set like a specific time. And if this test runs, either today or 5 days from now, I'm not going to get the same value from the smart contract from Chainlink. So by mocking it, I basically sort of impersonate it, I suppose, and I force it to return either nothing or a very specific value, and that's pretty much how SMOC works. It was my first time playing around with it.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. I mean, there's a lot of first times in Ethereum, so the great thing is it may seem like there's a lot of technical things, but I would say 95 to 99% of the people that you meet, it's their first time doing something. The ecosystem is changing very much, so even the most advanced OG people in the space are new to something. So if you like being new to something and finding people and exploring things with people, I think Web3, the Metamask community, the Ethereum community is a great community. I mean, and there's other blockchains as well. There's like, Solana and all that. But, there's the general ethos is let's build something, let's test it out, let's build together, and hopefully it works and it's cool. I mean, there's just so many unexplored things that you can build. I compare sort of where Ethereum is to where JavaScript was maybe 1997 or something like that. 98, not quite 95 when it came out, because we have a lot of stuff that we understand a lot more, but it's right before like this big boom. There's now patterns that allow you to kind of allow you to build bigger sort of smart contracts in a more scalable, modular manner. And I think that that's the genesis for like in a couple of years from now, seeing large scale applications that do like, investment bank level things from your basement.
Is it safe to say that in an application like the one that you guys built for the workshop, that if you're up to speed on testing React and JavaScript, then pretty much the only thing that you're going to need to learn is Solidity and probably test how to test Solidity, and then you've pretty much still got everything covered?
Yeah, I would say that if you're coming in from the React community, you are 90% of the way there. I'd say 93% of the way there. That extra 8% is the Solidity, yeah, like you said, and then learning ethers and a tool chain. But that just comes with just building a lot of stuff with friends. It's more than 80% for sure, because all the skills kind of apply. The one caveat I'm gonna have is it's sort of like Solidity testing is even more important. It's extremely important, especially if you launch something to mainnet. You want to make sure that you have not only full test coverage, but you also start using these things called fuzzers, where you throw the fuzzer is basically like throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing like where the error is and finding the corner cases. So it's like a shotgun approach instead of like precisely looking for specific things in your test. Like if it's 3, okay, it passes under 10. Like no. Let's call the whole range. Let's dump in complex numbers or like floating point numbers. Let's throw everything we can at this. Because if you're God willing, let's say your contract, you have an application, it does very well, a lot of people start using it. You don't want to have an exploit there, or worse, actually, everything works, but there's a lot of failure in your contract, and you didn't really build a way to upgrade it. So then a lot of money gets stuck there. So just like understanding the niceties of Solidity and going into fuzzing, and you should be okay. The fuzzing helps you kind of feel confident that you can deploy something that may have 10, 20, $30 million into it.
Yeah. Like in my apps, my React apps, I usually have some type of a folder called utility, and it's got like mostly just pure JavaScript stuff that's super important to make sure that logic in the app works. And I'm usually more concerned with testing that first and writing unit tests around that before anything around like my front end code or end-to-end testing. But it like Solidity is even way more important than that, because this is the thing that you're deploying out to the blockchain and is going to be dealing with very high value assets potentially. Yeah.
And there's this thing called the diamond standard that allows you to sort of create sort of a pattern that you're able to be very modular with Solidity. And when you're 100% confident that everything's kind of locked down, you can flip a switch and it becomes permanent, right? So these new type of standards allow you to kind of like take a sigh of relief and be able to update things if they're not working. If you love patterns, and let's say you've used a lot of patterns in your career prior, that gives you a very big leg up in the space, and you'll find it very fruitful to solve low-hanging fruits. It'll make you very happy to be in this ecosystem. It's sort of like, oh man, this thing that I've solved a couple of years ago, it's not exactly the same, but I can use this pattern. I can use the same type of idea in Solidity. Let's see if it works out. And then the community, if it works out, is the most supportive community I think I've seen anywhere. Like people just generally love cheering each other on. So you can make a big impact in a few couple of months. And I can't really say that about other ecosystems, but for this one, it's felt very quickly. I mean, Gary Vee didn't know about NFTs like 5 months ago. Now he's I guess like the NFT king. So you can close the gap pretty quickly if you want to. if Gary can do it, I think you can.
You said something earlier when you guys were going through the README. You were talking about how, Web3 is kind of analogous to Web2 back in the day. You might not have said that exactly, but kind of the idea was that, Web2 came around. It was like, we've got HTML5, CSS3, and responsive design, all this kind of stuff. And it was a new thing. And people, some people would mock it. It was kind of like a marketing term. But over the next few years, it became commonplace inside web development. And I'm thinking that Web3 is kind of the same thing. You hear the same thing going on right now. You hear some people that are kind of all in. Some people say it's a marketing term, which it kind of is, but in a few years, do you see this just being another thing like cloud or another thing that every developer has in their toolbox?
Yeah, I mean, think about the power of being able to create networks. Well, first of all, think about it from the practical engineering perspective. If you have a startup, the marketing costs of trying to get people to sign up to yet another service, right? To overcome that hurdle. With Web3, like, you don't really have to sign up for anything because it's the shared database. So as long as you sign in with Metamask, all your data from everything in there just comes with you, right? So you already have like all this data you can do things with. Just from an engineering perspective, you just have a much more richer experience, easier onboarding to a certain extent, at least from the data perspective, the backend perspective, and then more data to actually do things with and create richer experiences for people. So from that very practical perspective, I think people are going to start to see that, oh, wait a minute, like if so-and-so used this application, this game application that is really fun, I bet can build on top of that game application, not to ask permission. Think about if there's a really popular game, let's say Pokemon comes out on Ethereum or Polygon, and then you create a Pokemon derivative on top of that allows you a marketplace that people trade certain types of Pokemon or train them. You wouldn't have to ask permission, right? So from an investor perspective and from an engineering perspective, it's really attractive because you can get a lot of users very quickly, right? In terms of just general future prediction, I mean, I'm not a really good person that can prognosticate, but I would say that it's going to be as big as JavaScript because there are more people now with the internet. There are more people now with phones. Internally, we see MetaMask growing a lot in emerging markets. So the people who use the internet are much bigger. What Ethereum and Web3 can solve. In Western markets, you kind of take it for granted, but in places like the Philippines, where a lot of people don't have bank accounts, it takes off like wildfire, right? So emerging markets and places that sort of need international markets will quickly take into this. So you'll see like a whole new space. Instead of competing for the same type of consumers, you have 1 billion consumers coming online now that need something that you can build in a weekend.
Some of the people I've been talking to from like Lagos, Nigeria, I think we might even have someone on the call from there. Yeah, Linda. She was kind of telling me how, in the last year, there was a lot going on there. We don't need to talk about that, but that they really found that having Bitcoin and crypto gave them a lot of opportunities and options to pay and get paid for things because the banks were, kind of screwed up during that period of time. And that's gonna, that can happen anywhere. I did have a question for Dina.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that we can go back to the UI real quick?
Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but I noticed that on a lot of websites, when you connect to MetaMask or any wallet for that matter, a lot of them, it'll just open up the wallet in the Chrome extension or the browser extension. And it seems like you have like this little, almost like a little profile area up at the top right here where it's got the address in it.
Yeah.
So that's just showing the address, but kind of what else could you do with that? Like if you wanted to expand that out, if you clicked on it, like what other information could you be showing in there to kind of help the user out? Could you be showing them kind of the balances that are in their account? What kind of information do you have access to?
Yeah. So I could do what Uniswap does, which is actually like, well, let me see if I can get on this.
And be careful.
I'll test that in, but let me see if I can connect the wallet. Maybe it just might work. Wrong network. Okay, fine. Fine, we'll connect. All right. So I could do what Uniswap does, and whenever I expand this, I can view it on Explorer,
Nice.
right? So I can see whatever transactions I've had in the past. I'd be able to see my balance, my full address. What I could also do is, if I have Dina Deljan and .eth, I could actually like resolve it, or not resolve it. I could actually like get the ENS name, and then I can also get the avatar, so I could actually show more of like a user
User profile.
yeah, that looks exactly like, logging in for any normal Web2 app, instead of just like an email
Because
address.
with ENS, I think they're making it available to where you can like set an NFT as like your profile picture, which is kind of cool thing to do. And so with a wallet address, you could potentially resolve the ETH address or the other way around, and then go and fetch the information that's associated with that account. Almost like what was that Gravatar kind of would do when you would log into a site? It would kind of grab all of your information that all of your profile information and show it across all the sites that you use. I think that'll be available kind of with ENS domains as well.
Yeah, it's massively powerful to be able to have this identity system that like whatever name you want to have, like funcat.eth, right? You're able to receive funds, you're able to send funds, you're able to engage in governance and sign in with that in any place, and it still respects your privacy. It's almost like in the future, I think that one of the biggest sort of things that is going to change the game for UX UI design is going to be ENS domains, and any domains that are .btc, .dao, .eth. Instead of having proprietary like handles like .gmail, like Gmail or Yahoo or whoever uses Hotmail, we'll have something that you can actually truly own, that is yours, and that works across any system, or at least any Ethereum-based system, which is amazing. It's an internet native handle that you own. So it's the beginning of having what you would call a self-sovereign identity. Back in the day, it was a very loaded term, very kind of mystical. What is it? Now it's very pragmatic. I think I've had the delight to see all these theoretical things over the years actually become pragmatic and usable, or almost usable, right? ENS domains. You can have now a place where you can have all your data, and all your funds and all that other stuff that you own, and it's yours, right? And it's independent from an entity giving you that identity. So it's the maximum amount of decentralization, right? It's decentralization of one.
To add to it, I think I could also, would you show the spend limit allowance for a user too? That's important. So gutted we didn't get to actually like put the form together, but I can show you what I did for one of my forms, which is also using ethers. I wanted to have a spend limit because my project pretty much only takes DAI, right? And before you can actually send any DAI to the smart contract, you have to actually approve a spend limit, approve a specific amount that my smart contract can have access to of yours, right? That's also another thing, like next to the balance, it's just as important. And over here, where am I importing? I have my utils to make them small numbers and big numbers because we're going to be toggling through that off and on. I have a spend limit tooltip, and let's do, let me see. All right, here we go. So I want to try to approve the DAI, and at some point I am importing, let me see, I think it's in the context too. Yeah, it is. So at some point, I am actually like connecting the DAI smart contract, right? And then when I get to the enable allowance form, I'm calling one of the methods, which is from the erc20.sol from OpenZeppelin, passing in my smart contract address and turning the amount that I want to enable, approve, into a big number. And we're waiting for one transaction, not one transaction, sorry, one confirmation to go through. And once that's done, now we want to check the allowance again, pass that in, and we're going to have an updated allowance going, and then that's going to dispatch a success modal. So that would also be another important thing, because like you have to go to, what is it, debank, I believe, to remove whatever spend limits you have set for contracts in the past, I believe.
Yeah. So this is really important because the one advice I can give is that smart contracts sounds like this mystical, magical thing, but it really is just like taking business logic, right? Taking logic that would be on a piece of paper, right? That maybe a lawyer will give you, and then putting it on some sort of distributed database so that everyone agrees upon it. What does that do? And in the meat space, you have legal systems which act as ways to ensure consensus, right? Everyone agrees because the judge says so and the government says so. And that's what it works, right? A lawyer writes something up, I sign it, and just because a contract is placed in front of me doesn't mean it's a good deal. So if someone gives me a contract and it says, hey, I'll give you $50 to share your banking information or allow us to have unlimited sort of access to your accounts, that's kind of a bad deal. The same can be on the internet, in fact, more extreme to a certain extent. Just because something is a token, when you see token, just think contract, right? And it's really important to look at sort of the permissions that you give this contract, this token, because some permissions may be raw deals, and some permissions may be great deals, right? So it's really important to kind of, if you're signing something in the cyberspace, same as the meat space, do your due diligence, make sure that the thing you're signing doesn't have too many permissions to deal and take away from your assets, right? So the blockchain really just is a way that enforces agreements between people on the internet. And what you can do with that, sky's the limit. But just be careful with spending permissions.
And there's a nice website where you can go and kind of check all that out. What is the name of it?
Right? I think it was Debank.
Yeah, that's one of them, definitely. And then, oh, this is a better one than I've seen. But through here, you can kind of see what sites that you've given, what decentralized apps you've given access to your wallet. And you can see if there's like an unlimited spend on each of them and potentially stop that. Or is that kind of the idea for this one here, or is this different?
Yeah. Think of permissions like money cookies. Now, if cookies follow you around, permissions or money cookies, they're like the opposite. It's not them following you around, it's sort of them putting the hand in your pocket, right? So you just want to make sure that every sort of money cookie that you have out there, aka permission, is that you feel great with, like, hey, this person can sure access my wallet, or they can see this thing. If you don't really know the entity, don't interact with it. Again, there's 50,000 dapps out there. A lot of them are great. A lot of them are amazing. And there's also a lot of room for, just bad actors. The same way on Google, just because it's on Google and it shows up in the search, doesn't mean you should download something from them. It's like the same logic that appears with emails, right? And downloading weird things. The same logic that appears with Web2 with clicking weird things is the same logic that we have for Web3, which is giving permissions to things. It's the same logic. It's just a lot of it is repetition, but it seems like a new thing, but it's not really. It's just common sense in a new form. That's all.
So the one I was thinking of was revoke.cash. But MetaMask kind of does that itself, right? You can go and kind of see what apps you're connected to and what kind of, this is.
Yeah, in some ways.
Yeah.
So we'll give an alpha drop here for people who really love JavaScript. We're creating this thing called Metamask Snaps, which allows you to extend Metamask APIs. So you don't have to necessarily rebuild MetaMask to actually get the benefits of MetaMask. So in theory, you can create something that in the browser, you can click on it, it extends MetaMask and allows you to see all the permissions you have and then revoke the ones or put a timer on certain permissions and revoke those things. So that's an amazing thing that we're appealing to JavaScript developers to interact with Web3 without having actually to write Solidity. So if you're really good with TypeScript or you're really good with JavaScript, you can extend the functionality of MetaMask and interact with Web3 that way. It's an amazing opportunity that's coming out next year, and you'll hear more from us from that. So it's pretty amazing the things you can do. Again, the sky's the limit. What can you do with a portal that allows you to connect to the Internet of Assets? What type of APIs can you create? Pretty cool.
This might be a silly question, but what kind of things can you do without funds being involved in an app? So,
Oh yeah, it's a great question.
is it really?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question, actually. It's a really good question. You can send encrypted and decrypted messages without having to put things on chain. You can, in some ways, have a single sign-in. So you can sign in with MetaMask in certain websites if they actually implement it. So you don't have to have Google anymore. You can just sign in with MetaMask.
Okay.
Right. You can sign legal documents with this thing called ETH. So the same way you have DocuSign, you
Yeah.
can do the same thing with MetaMask, and just sign legal documents, right? And you won't have to necessarily spend ETH, the same way DocuSign doesn't spend any ETH. Now, if you want to put the agreement on chain, then it's like filing it with the court, right? In some ways, right? But you can certainly do that without ETH, and sign the actual document. There's a lot of things you can do with snaps. You'll be able to eventually do a lot of like honestly, whatever you can think. You can add Bitcoin, you can add Cardano, you can add Solana. You can build applications on top of MetaMask to do certain things without having to use ETH. So it's going to be a nice sandbox that allows you to anything you can do to with data from the blockchain, which is terabytes of data, you'd be able to do with snaps through MetaMask without ETH.
With just signing, could you do like voting applications?
Yes, you'd go to Snapshot, and Snapshot is just a great way to vote on things off chain. So you can actually vote on DAOs. If you Google Snapshot DAOs, you'd be able to like participate in your favorite DAOs. So you'll say, hey, you verify you have this amount of tokens, and then that gives you percentage of voting power, and then you can vote through Snapshot without paying ETH.
And potentially without even that, like when you're signing, really all you're doing is just saying this wallet has kind of, we've just kind of if you're signing, it's just your wallet that's kind of checking in with the Dapp in a sense.
It's like a handshake in a way. It's like
that's a better word.
It's like, hey, this is me. The assumption is that if you control the wallet, that's you. But it's the same assumption with a regular signature, right? Looks close enough to your handwriting, that's you, right? I imagine that's a lower standard of proof than a cryptographically proven thing. Maybe not, I don't know. I mean, people are good forgings. It's harder to forge a cryptographic signature than it is a handwritten signature. So the assumption is if you sign something, that's you. And the cool thing is that you can engage in collaboration and agreements with anyone in the world in an open and adversarial method without having to worry about transnational issues. Asterisk, consult your tax accountant. This is not legal advice. So it's pretty cool. It allows you to collaborate with people around the world in an easy way. And you can do a lot of these things without even having to have ETH, right? Yep.
I'm just thinking about like all of the applications that this enables. And it seems like if you're getting into Web3 and kind of smart contracts right now, the landscape is still something that you can kind of have in your entire peripheral vision. Like you can still see it all right now. And if you're getting in now, it's kind of like getting in to React back in like 2014 or something. There's not a lot there is a lot to learn, but it's still manageable. Whereas in a few years from now, I feel like there's going to be so much that you can do this and with so much to learn. So kind of getting in early and learning this stuff just adds one more thing. It was almost like cloud, like even cloud at the beginning was very, or like you said, machine learning. It was kind of very basic at first. And now you can do anything with these things. And I feel like this is going to be the same thing. If the earlier you get in and the earlier you start learning about this stuff, then you've kind of got a leg up on what is the future of development.
Yeah. And the benefit is that 90% of your knowledge already transfers over. Like if you had to like go into cloud, maybe you have to learn Amazon's proprietary stuff and be stuck with AWS. But here, honestly, like I would say even if you're changing between chains, a lot of the mentality of how to program for decentralized applications sticks. So let's say you want to go on Solana, you have to use Rust or Solidity now. The logic is still sticks with you. So the great thing is it's not like learning Haskell or Lisp or something like that. The information you have largely carries over. There are a few things you have to consider, but you just focus on those things. If you get really good at those things, you become a 10x developer, and you're able to have 100x impact, because there's so much people that actually need this stuff, because it's just much more efficient, honestly, than what we have currently in the banking system. It takes 15 seconds to settle some sort of transaction. It takes days to settle, let's say, in a very fast legal system, something. With Ethereum, it's like 15 seconds. And if you really want to get spicy with it, maybe half an hour, if you really want to make sure it went through okay, right? So yeah, it allows for large scale legal agreements.
Nice.
There's large scale agreements and collaborate. It doesn't have to be legal. They're not as legally binding.
Do we have any other questions in the chat?
The job market for Web3 devs is looking amazing. We're hiring. Consensus is hiring like 400 people. We're hiring a lot of people with experience with React and React Native. This is the perfect place actually to show this. We're looking to step up our React Native team. So if you have that skill set, please reach out to me at my email, anthony.albertorio@consensus.net. We're looking for a lot of React developers, actually, a lot of JavaScript developers and TypeScript developers. So if you guys are interested, Consensus is hiring. And there's also these thing called DAOs, right? So if you just go down the rabbit hole with Finematics, or just go to the Defiant, and you just start Googling the names of common places, common organizations that you see, you'll see that a lot of these open source projects actually give funds out, right? So the amazing thing about, I think, Web3 is that you can work on open source and get paid, right? You're creating these tool sets that everyone can benefit, and some of the value is captured, but not all of it. So it's enough to actually pay your salary, have a comfortable life. I mean, the people who started working at Yearn Finance, like a decentralized hedge fund, it's all open source, but a lot of them are doing very well for themselves. It's an easier path to liquidation events, like liquidity events. So if you're working at a startup, sometimes you're stuck with a vesting schedule, and that takes a long time. But if you work on a token project, you can basically finagle that, right, and have faster path to liquidity. It's just there's a lot of projects out there looking for people. There's not enough people in the space and a lot of demand. So I think, yes, the market right now is hot. It goes through ups and downs, but whenever the Bitcoin halving happens, you can kind of set your clock to it that 6 months later it can blows up and there's a mania, and then sometimes it ebbs a little bit, but for the most part, we're on the up and up. And it's even from an intellectual curiosity perspective, there's just so many amazing things you can learn that it's just fun in and of itself. Yeah.
I've kind of found that with some of the places that I was looking in my search for a Web3 job, is that a lot of the people that I talked to were more interested in the fact that you had experience as a developer, and that you had a lot of Web2 experience, UI experience, and were kind of less, they kind of know, well, it's kind of hard for a lot of these developers to have a ton of Web3 experience, but just knowing that they've been around for a while, that they have basic web, not basic Web 2, experience in Web 2, then there's a lot that they can learn on the job. And in combination with that, and also the fact that there are just not enough, it seems like there's not enough developers to go around at the rate that these companies are hiring, that you really have a good opportunity of landing a Web3 gig if you have 4 or 5 years of experience in development, and potentially even less, but that would, if you have that, I would find it very hard that you couldn't find a job in this space.
Yeah, it's great to be in a space where you're wanted and you're needed. If you're working for big tech, maybe they put up artificial barriers because so many people are trying to get in the door. I would say the best parties are not the main parties, but the side parties and the party after the party. We're like a side party where maybe it's some weirdos there and maybe some interesting stuff happening there, but you're gonna find a lot of interesting characters. You're gonna find a lot of efficiencies. Where the music is way better. And yeah, so I think that Web3 is because it's so new, there's so much. If you want to work on projects where you can make a disproportionate impact in a short amount of time, or you want to sort of be a cog in a wheel in big tech, you can choose. That's okay. I mean, Google offers it's a comfortable job, but I think and like big tech created React and they create a lot of the stuff that Ethereum is based on. But if you really want to make a disproportionate impact in things and build new things and maintain them and learn an ecosystem, then I think Web3 is for you. If you have the inkling to take a small risk in your career. And the best advice I ever got in tech was that things change every 5 years. So, every 5 years is a new little revolution within tech. So better to get out of it.
So Metamask is part of Consensus, right? And kind of what role have they played in kind of Ethereum development and even just overall blockchain as a blockchain company? If someone's interested in looking for a job there or anywhere else, kind of what can you say about Consensus? What is a brief history? Who's involved?
So Consensus was started by one of the co-founders of Ethereum, the Honorable Joe Lubin, amazing person, visionary, honestly. A lot of the things that we use today in our production grade, he had the vision to help fund. So Consensus started off as a venture studio for Ethereum development back in when it first came out, 2015, 16, 17. It was a protocol, but it was very like kind of virgin ground. There was really not much happening there. Not much happening, but a lot of the tool sets needed to be built out. So out of Consensus came, first of all, like Truffle and Metamask and Gitcoin and all these amazing projects, Infura, which kind of like helps power a lot of decentralized applications. Metamask is the leading wallet. But the cool thing was also that Consensus served as a training ground for people who eventually moved on to other places, almost like Fairchild Semiconductor or Intel, right? In the sense that it served as an incubator to like share these values and experiment with things. And now people who are doing big things and different startups, there's always somebody from Consensus, ex-Consensus person there. So it was a really good place to like learn a lot of things, and it still is a great place to learn a lot of things. We recently had a raise, a unicorn now. We have product market fit, and our products span end to end. I think we're one of the few entities in the blockchain space that goes from everything from like pop tech, like generative NFTs for music, to like end user things like MetaMask, all the way to like auditing services and like talking to central banks in the White House. So we go from like NFTs to talking to like central banks around the world and how do you see central bank digital currencies. If you really want to know and understand blockchain from some of the smartest people in the world, some of the brightest minds in the industry, Consensus is almost like a playground for you. You can go there, and the pro is that you learn so much. The con is that there's not enough time, right? So, but if you're a person who loves to learn and grow and experiment, Consensus, I think, is the best company in the world to work for, and I'm honored to be there. I'm very excited. And check out Griffith's walkthrough; it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I was going to ask, or I was going to say that it seems like Consensus might be one of those companies that just kind of maybe very unique in that pretty much everything that they're doing is blockchain Ethereum related, and that's really cool. Yeah. There was another question in the chat, and I think it might be for Dina, and I think we were wondering if you could give us an idea of kind of what you had to think about when you were building this application. What did you start with? Did you maybe have a boilerplate project that you use a lot and that you spun up? Did you build the whole thing from scratch? What were some of the thoughts that you were going through when kind of putting it together? Where did you start? How did you finish? I think that was kind of what he wanted to know.
Definitely put it together from scratch. It was both this project and my last project too. I always start with styled components in Framer Motion. That is like my go-to tool set right there. That is where I'm the most comfortable and where I get the craziest. And then after that, it was picking ethers, and then it was going along to install a truffle as well. So.
Oh, what? Oh, the truffle.
Like, yeah, to install truffle as well. So at that point, I guess like my flow, my workflow at first, I start out with anything that I can attack with window.ethereum. So like, that's why I showed the onboarding modal first, right? I would be able to say, flash that out even further and say, well, after the onboarding modal shows up, if you're on a browser that doesn't have Metamask installed, I can also then grab like the chain ID and the network and say, well, if you're not on mainnet, if you're actually on the test net, or if you're not on like one of the local host networks that you'd set up, have a modal pop up there. So I guess my approach is usually like deterring actions first, I guess more defensive at least. That would be
kind of starting out with the functional components first, and then kind of, you probably did a lot of the UI and styling at the end, and probably started with just connecting to the wallet and how you were going to build a smart contract, potentially some tests, and then moved on from there.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think I got his question correct. Let's see. Smart contracts are stateful. They hold state in the Ethereum network. Compared to regular backend, the only different, I'm sorry, I'm reading a question. Compared to the regular backend.
That's the answer to, I think, Oliver's question.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Are smart contracts stateful or stateless? How do they compare to regular backend apps where we design and implement both architecture patterns? Smart contracts are stateful. They hold state on the blockchain, right? This blockchain being Ethereum. The only difference compared to regular backend is that the methods used to interact with them, like use Ether.js or Web3.js. Think of yeah, no worries. Think of like Ethereum, if you want like a nice mental model, as like MongoDB, and like Ether.js is like Mongoose or something like that, right? You can interact directly with MongoDB or Couchbase or something like that, but it's better to have like a nice intermediary language, right? Or some sort of like helper library that allows it for you to do it a little easier, right? So like Ethers and Web3 is that. So just learning that API surface helps you to interact with this different blockchain, or this different database. A blockchain is a distributed database, right? It's essentially copied and it's very redundant. Why would you want something that's very redundant? It seems inefficient. You trade efficiency for security and for agreement, right? So it's like everyone's on the same page and no one owns the network. There are certain types of applications that this is very good for. Let's say applications where there's something very serious and everyone uses. Interest rates or something I always use. Who sets the interest rate, right, is very important. If you can say no one sets the interest rate because everyone sets the interest rate because it's based on the market, then you have, a fair interest rate market that then affects your student loans and your car notes and your mortgage, and everyone can verify that no one is doing any shady business. So it's like a public good. So wherever there's like a public good that everyone relies upon, blockchains are really good to create applications around, because no one owns it and everyone owns it. The same like the internet. No one owns the internet, right? Everyone agrees to use the internet, and the internet is very important for everyone, but there's not like the CEO of the internet, certain social media platforms can censor it, but like the internet itself, can't. Yeah, that's kind of the difference. The main thing you should really focus on though is like heavily test your methods. And that's the big difference. Just test, right? Just test as much as you can. What you're interacting with in the chain, especially if you wrote the smart contract. So your test should outnumber your contract code, and then your front end will probably outnumber your everything else. So this is a test case that middleware needs to be involved in the app. Use Node.js for to interact with Truffle. So a dependency of Truffle is or hard hat is Node.js. You can have let's say like a server to like cache historical data for things, if that's your jam. Just because you use Ethereum doesn't mean you don't have to use central services. You can actually use both of them and create a very seamless experience. Like you can't store videos or even images on the blockchain because it's very expensive, right? But so you would use a centralized server. Eventually, there's like protocols that are being created and networks that allow you to store video, like LivePeer, or store large media files like IPFS and Filecoin. But for now, it could be a graceful change. You don't have to be decentralized automatically, all at once. You can make that graceful transition.
So you could build, like, in essence, like a hybrid app where,
Yes.
and some of the, obviously you can't store everything on chain. It would be way too expensive, as you just stated. But so there is a reason to use, maybe not fully like well, I guess, yes, like a centralized database for storing certain information. In some cases, maybe even like profile information is maybe where you start, but that might scale out to be something where you need to store a lot more information about the app, maybe preferences for the user, multiple wallets, all sorts of things, and potentially all the information. Here's a good one. Your wallet exposes quite a bit of information. Is it normal for decentralized apps to kind of store that along with your profile? And is it all safe to be for them to store and for them to have that information about you?
Yeah. So since blockchains are public, your address, right? Your identity is synonymous, right? But everything you put on the chain is openly visible. So when people say Bitcoin's really useful for criminals, I'm like, oh no. I mean, there's a history that's going to last forever. And if they ever link you to that history, you can go back in time and see everything that's been done, right? Also, so like just things are immutable, things last forever on the blockchain. You wouldn't want to necessarily put something sensitive on the blockchain, like your social security number or your health records or things like this, right? Like, don't. Baby pictures, maybe if you don't mind the whole world to see, but once it's on there, it's on there. You can't get it off, right? You can't like remove it. You can't revert. You can't change the past. The same way once information is out, you can't really put the genie back in the bottle, right? So blockchains are really good for things where you want this information to be public because you want to coordinate with other people, right? So like there's certain types of information that you don't want people to know, like, hey, my banking information, but there's other types of things that I want people to know that I can coordinate with. So like if I'm trying to get, let's say, a loan or something like that, I would want my history of payments to be kind of public, right? Or at least that I paid on time to be public, right? Not necessarily what I bought. So then that helps like create some sort of decentralized credit score or something like that, right? So there's certain types of activities that you want public. I don't mind my gaming information for blockchain games to be public, right? But I do mind like, like where I am all the time, like, like my location 24/7. I'm like, okay, no, why? So blockchains are really good for information. When you think blockchains, think incentivized coordination. What information is good for me to coordinate with others? And if you want to put that out there, sure. And if you don't want to put that out there, don't use a centralized server for now. There's new types of blockchains that are being created that are focused a lot on privacy. There's old ones like Monero, right? Which is like it's just almost like Bitcoin, but with privacy shields and Zcash. But then the smart contract platforms that are being created. And then there's protocols like Aztec protocol, which allow you to basically shield certain types of information using these things called ZK snarks. Basically very fancy math that allows you to prove something without giving any excess information. So like if you're playing poker, there's no tells, right? You can prove, let's say that you put your bet in the poker hand, but you're not giving the tell that you have under or over in some ways.
Yeah, he was asking, what about this other React framework that looks promising? At the end of the day, you can build Web3 into any React framework, any Angular framework, any Vue framework, any regular vanilla JavaScript application. It's kind of just like you're adding an extra config to your project and some extra code in a different folder that you're going to want to interact with probably that might store your contracts, but that kind of stuff is it's not necessarily separate from your React app, but it's in a sense of kind of installing and configuring it. It is, you can add truffle or hard hat or whatever you want to any application that you're building in any framework.
Yeah. So we can check out the MetaMask docs as well to check out the APIs in some ways.
Cool.
So the MetaMask documentation is a great place to see, like, just with the regular JavaScript skills now, what can you do, right? Right. So you can detect, like, like the Ethereum network, and then you through MetaMask, you're connected. Amazing, right? You can see whether Ethereum is connected. You can see whether it's disconnected. You can see if you change the networks. You can error handle. There's all these things. You can definitely with chain IDs. These are the IDs for the different networks that we were talking about. And then if you go down to like the RPC API, Dina, really cool stuff. You can look at these things and it's like, okay, well, you can get permissions for account. You can request accounts. You can encrypt things and decrypt things. Is there an alternative to MetaMask? Oh, yeah. I would say that there's a Lindy effect, though, in the sense that MetaMask is decentralized. There's a lot of wallets that have central servers, but the thing is that these servers hold your keys in their servers, and if those servers are compromised, then you can lose your funds. MetaMask doesn't hold any information about you. You hold the wallet, the wallet's on your machine, and then you hold those keys there. There are alternatives to MetaMask, but I don't think any of them are as good. Obviously, I'm biased, but we haven't had any sort of vulnerability. Yeah. So so you can check out all these other things, like how to switch chains. You can create really interesting UIs where you can just click on a button and it sets up the chain and it sets up the token automatically in your MetaMask, which is a common pain point that people have. Eventually, with Snaps coming out, you'll be able to extend these APIs so that you can create any type of API that respects, obviously, the user's privacy, but at the same time extends it so that you don't have to worry about the security model of guarding very sensitive keys. You can only focus on the business logic that you want to create to use those keys to deliver some sort of value, right? And you can do all this without Ethereum. And that's kind of a lot of our focus in the next year is to do a lot of outreach to the React community, to do a lot of outreach to the JavaScript community, because we have this amazing sort of platform that's the gateway to this whole new type of internet. And you can use your existing skills today to build upon it and try it out. So 10 hours, let's say a weekend spent learning yet another framework, right? Or 10 hours spending how to use MetaMask really well and creating a snap, you're going to get a disproportionate amount of upside from, I would say, learning with MetaMask and building stuff with MetaMask and building maybe even a Dapp, because it's so new. It's like being in the West and having this bountiful land that it's just the soil is rich and the sun's always beaming. And, it's like arriving in the Bay Area, 1960. It's beautiful. College is cheap, right? Cost of living is great. Or, being in Barcelona or something in the south of France. It's just a beautiful place to be. And you get a lot out of it. There's a lot of people willing to help too and experiment.
Yeah, so I posted the link again to the workshop, the code sample, and you should definitely try to pull that down and just some of the ideas that we talked about with that with the wallet UI at the top. See what you can add to that. Maybe on the ticket purchase, play around with that. Like what other methods can you call on the MetaMask API, and what other information do you think is missing from the app, and how can you add that? Like, these are just simple things that you can do and play around with this repository, and you're going to learn so much. Or maybe you just want to sit there and look through all the solidity tests. There's a lot that you can kind of learn from this application. Not only that, but the README is like chock full of just crazy resources in here, and not all just to do with MetaMask. Like, there's information, there's interviews, or there's books. I saw a whole bunch of stuff in here, and it was just, I'm probably going to spend a week going through this README.
Yeah, use the README as an ongoing conversation. It's an asynchronous conversation. But if you have, let's say you stumbled upon some sort of link in the README and you have a question, open an issue. I'll be watching it. I'll be adding things to this. So this workshop, I think, is designed just to introduce you to this blockchain spectrum and why it's important and why it's amazing. Is a lot to take in, as you see in the first chart. That's why I chose the first chart. It's a lot to understand. And it's a slow burn. I know for me it was. But kind of go through the README, right? You'll get a lot of going through this README just slowly. And anytime you have a question, open an issue. I'll be there. Dina will be there. We'll be answering those questions. We're very excited to answer any and all questions. It doesn't have to be MetaMask.
I think it would be interesting to kind of know how long, I know that you covered a little bit of this early, but how long have each of you been in this space? Or maybe how long ago was it that you knew absolutely zero about Ethereum, absolutely zero about MetaMask? And kind of what has your journey been like?
That's a great question.
For both of you.
Dina, you want to go first?
Well, I knew about Bitcoin in 2014, but I was just in high school at that time. No, actually earlier. I was out of high school by that time. Didn't really do anything with it then. I guess 2017, really. That was when I was brave enough to get wrecked for the first time.
Yeah. Okay, losing the cash.
And then instead of, shoot, I just got wrecked, I never want to touch crypto again, I ended up working in it. I actually ended up working in it for a very small startup that covered a lot of different areas. So like early DAOs, basically early oracles. And then that's how Anthony and I met, because that's when I started going to meetups. Then I realized there's like a whole community of developers out there and you don't have to learn how to program on your own. So we pretty much like huddled like shoulder to shoulder in the brutal summer of what was it, 2018, especially like where was it? I think Cafe. Every week, literally. So
yeah, we had this really active, the most active blockchain Ethereum meetup in the world, ETH Builders. Check them out. Just Google ETH Builders. It's just started off in a coffee shop downtown New York, and I knew about Ethereum early on during the ICO and Bitcoin before that, but I was really into medical applications and I was working in research at Columbia University, and I was really focused on healthcare and big data. And then I realized that the main problem I think with healthcare and is the principal agent problem. This problem exists in different systems that become heavily centralized, where the interests of the people who manage the centralized organization may not be the same as the participants. So I realized that a lot of obstacles in improving healthcare research was the data, and that data, a lot of that obstacle was not necessarily the regulations per se, it was more of the incentive problem. So using blockchains as a way to create incentives for people to collaborate, not necessarily share data, but collaborate, was something that kind of pushed me finally into the rabbit hole and away from a curiosity to focus on it. So I got into consensus around 2017 around figuring out how to, starting to look at that problem. And then it was more fundamental problems at that point because the protocol was so new. So it was really more about like, how do you do self-sovereign identity, access rights to data, what type of data should you go in? And we kept on going into sort of the problem of how do you describe this massive thing called Web3 that requires 2 or 3 conceptual leaps. So I started doing the meetups a lot and building community in New York and really getting in depth with it. And then when the bear market happened, I kind of just doubled down and said, well, this is my career. This is the most exciting thing I've ever seen. Hodl and hodl and just write it out. And honestly, the bear market is the best time when things are not, when the hype is no longer there and prices are not very high. It's the best time to experiment. And you're going to meet the closest people in the ecosystem that are going to offer you opportunities later on. Just honestly, 95% of it just continuing to show up and not being afraid to learn in public and not being afraid to say hi to somebody new, whether it's on the internet or in a conference like this, and just not being afraid to fail. This obviously errors in this code. It was a quick hackathon style thing. It's a lot of errors in this code, you'll see. But I think errors are really good ways of like learning because it gives us the opportunity to interact with you open an issue. We really want you to open issues on this thing. Ask questions. No question is a bad question. Because that's how you, like, I think the biggest thing about Web3 and Ethereum that keeps me here is the community. It's not really the price. It goes up, it goes down. It's the people in it, the values they have, and just the feeling of building something cool with other people around the world is amazing. You can do that in any ecosystem, but Ethereum is especially more international, especially more welcoming of people from around the world, especially caring of the needs of a diverse group of people. And it's an amazing technology that's yet to be explored. It looks like a tool. It looks like a toy right now. And I think the thing that inspired me to get into community building was this French VC fund called The Family. And they talk about basically how toys eventually, if you have the right amount of, eventually toys become massive sort of tools for industry. And you know, steam engine was a tool, was a toy back in the day, and somebody figured out how to put it next to like some sort of large truck and create a railroad, right? So I think Solidity and Ethereum is the same thing. It seems like a toy, seems kind of pointless, but play around and experiment. You'll see that there'll be amazing things in the future with this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting how, you know, a lot of the people that got into this space back in probably when you did, they had to, I wouldn't say suffer, but they had to go through bear markets. It's probably the first time that a bunch of developers have had to sit through like a bear market and watch people lose interest and kind of like almost hodl their investment in their development career, which is kind of weird. But yeah, you guys did it. But and then I kind of think about like when you're talking about when you started, it's almost like, to me, like how JavaScript was back in the browser war days, where it was there wasn't really a straightforward way of doing things. There weren't a lot of frameworks out there. It was kind of hard to work in that area. You know, you had DHTML and who knew how to use that? And then all of a sudden, you know, several years later, you've got jQuery, you've got React and Angular and Backbone and stuff, and all these things that make it very easy for a developer to kind of approach and get into it and build interactive UIs. And I feel like that right now, that's kind of where this space is. I could be a little bit wrong, but it seems like a really good time if you're not in it already to get started, because the barrier to entry is a little bit lower than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of documentation that's being created. Education is a big thing. And it's like, yeah, it's like learning, you know, like jQuery back in the day, right? Or even like learning, let's say Python, or it's like esoteric languages. Why would you want to learn them? Well, if they make you more productive, if they unlock a new type of skill and a new type of market, that may be worth learning. It really unlocks a new sort of layer of the internet, which allows for you to collaborate with people in a decentralized manner. And bear markets are great because it's like forest fires in some ways. It clears out the cruff. The signal becomes really powerful. The noise goes away, and gas fees go down, so you can deploy things.
Buy more ENS domains. Yeah.
Yeah, you can buy way more ENS domains. I got a lot of them.
Start loading up on them. And
oh yeah. If you're a fan of like back in the day, like domain squatting, I think that's coming back. I have a lot. I've
got so many domains that I'm just hoping someone will buy off me one day.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? You may land on one, right? But like, even then, I mean, look, the ENS air, like, if you're just thinking about this from a business perspective, you can also get airdrops, where just like ENS had this airdrop, and you know, these tokens have a liquid market. And
I missed it by like a month, not even a month, like a week. I missed it by.
I know, right? I wasn't even expecting.
If you had an ENS domain by a certain date, they basically did an airdrop, and some people were getting like, you know, their airdrop was in value like $10,000, and it was like crazy.
Yeah. So like Facebook doesn't give like buybacks to their users or something like that, right? But even like, I'm not looking at the financial aspect of things. Obviously consult your tax attorney and not financial advice. But I think the really important thing is that what these things represent is ownership in a communal property.
Yeah.
And responsibility. Even ENS says it. This is a responsibility. If you don't want it and sell it, don't use it. But it allows you to have a voice.
you can get airdrops without even knowing it, which is something that I didn't know a while back. Like I had bought into this guy's like first project of NFTs. And so I bought like 10 of them because they were like really cheap. And I was really just testing out kind of like how to buy NFTs. And then on his next drop, which was a little bit more of a popular NFT set, if you will. Yeah, I got airdropped one of those. I got airdropped a whole bunch of stuff that, it was just because I interacted with different NFT projects, which was really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, if these, they're not, I probably didn't make a whole lot of money off of it, but there definitely are people that have been airdropped NFTs that have done very well from reselling those. But
yeah, it's one of the, I think the only ecosystem where it rewards you with by just trying things out. Just try it out, and by being an early adopter, you can actually see tangible benefits both in your career, sometimes even financially. That's an added benefit. I mean, look, so like working for like big tech is great because you get to sometimes, like create projects like React and big was like just this TensorFlow and all these cool stuff. But then, Ethereum also has that. Plus, sometimes you get communal ownership in these networks and you have a bigger say. Like as a user of TensorFlow, maybe you don't have a say in Google's investments and what they do with their time. As a user of ENS or some sort of a protocol, you can say, hey, we want to go this way as a community. We believe in this. So you can vote with your values on Web3 as well, which is kind of cool. And from a perspective of ethics, I think it's, I'm not saying it's more ethical, but it allows you to express your ethics in a clear way. The incentives are there. They're very clear. If you want to go here, you do this. If you want to go here, you do that.
It opens up value opportunities for people creating open source as well. So you can basically, back in the day when you would create open source projects, you would typically have to get sponsored from other companies to actually make any money off of it. And I think that that's an interesting kind of thing to think about too, is that you can potentially get paid, like you said earlier, to develop on open source in various different ways.
Yeah, check out all your
around it.
Yeah, DAO. You can build DAOs. You can, DAOs are like internet native organizations of people, right? Which is amazing. You can organize people. It's not a chat room. It's literally like a chat room with a treasury, which is amazing because it's okay to coordinate on information, but if you can coordinate on information and value, that opens up the gates, right? It allows you to meet up in a park and then also buy the coffee stand, right? So if you can buy the coffee stand, I think your community can do more than just like meeting at a coffee stand, right? So it's a really interesting thing. Like allows you to experiment with what is value, what are values, what are assets, how can people collaborate with each other in different ways. Like a lot of the innovations in Web2 are like, UX, UI, and that's amazing. I think a lot of the innovations in Web3 are going to be how people can collaborate, right? And the UX, UI, and experience, the UX experience of how to get people to do something that they value and reward them for doing so. Being a first mover in a lot of things is bad, but with Web3, being the first mover is amazing. So I think that's maybe that could be like, if you want to sum everything up, you can say that if you're the first mover in Web3, things are pretty cool. Yeah.
I know we're coming up to about the 2-hour mark, and I wanted to make sure that the people that are still left here had the ability to ask you guys any questions that maybe we haven't answered yet. Does anyone want to open up their mic or type something in the chat? Sometimes it's easier to just open up your mic and ask the question.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a question about Web3, like any question that hasn't been answered today? Question about job opportunities, question about how something works, how wallets work, or anything.
Yeah. So any question is fair, is fair question. There's a lot to learn about Web3. So we don't have to just talk about MetaMask. I think consensus is a steward of Web3 in general. So it could be something as simple as like, why is my seed phrase? very important. Or something very low level, like how are the databases synced on, Ethereum, right? It would be very high level, like how do I join a DAO, right? What are the benefits of joining a DAO? Can I make a career out of it? The answer is yes, you can make a career out of it. I've seen it. Ethereum or Solana, depends what you want to do. I can give you my shilly answer being Ethereum all day, but honestly, it depends really what you want to do with it. So more of the question is like, it's like hammer or screwdriver. Depends what you want to do. Ethereum has a lot of liquidity and a lot of users. So there's a lot of like money in Ethereum. So if you're trying to do something that scales very quickly and can gain a lot of capital, and then you can migrate over or link to another chain, you can. Increasingly, Ethereum is becoming a settlement chain where you do very high level, high value things, or you can aggregate a bunch of like not so valuable things and settle on Ethereum. That's like the layer 1 and layer 2 type of thing. So if you want to do like games where you can have 100,000 transactions a second, and be super engaging, Solana lets you do that type of stuff. Like, misquote me, I'm probably misquoting on the transactions per second, but they're certainly very high. But you sacrifice decentralization, and that's really important to uphold value. But then you can settle a lot of the stuff on Ethereum at some point when people create bridges. Yeah, there's this thing called the trilemma problem where you can't really have decentralization, security, and I always forget the other one, trilemma problem. Security, decentralization, and scalability. That's the other one. Scalability is how many transactions per second. Security is how much value you could put on the chain. So if your consensus mechanism is strong enough with enough hashing power that you can uphold $20 billion of value, that's really good. If you have $21 billion, game theory states that you'll get hacked, at some point. Decentralization is like the amount of networks on your machine. Usually you sacrifice decentralization for scalability, right? Right. So Solana is more centralized, but more scalable. And Ethereum is more decentralized, a little less scalable, but there's a lot of research being done in how to rejig the architecture so that you get the benefits of decentralization and scalability and security all in one. So it's Solana pushes through, put through the roof. If you want to create a blockchain-based game, go on Solana or go on Polygon, which is EVM-based.
Yeah.
You can settle on Ethereum.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's, it's interesting kind of to look at some of the NFT projects and to see which ones are on Ethereum and which ones are on Polygon and how it kind of affects the price of them. And when some of these bigger ones that you guys hear about kind of in the news that are, doing 1,000% or whatever, like people are making millions of dollars on, they're typically all on, I just noticed that the most of them are on Ethereum. Now of course there are Polygon NFTs and Solana NFTs that probably do very well, but I just noticed that was an interesting thing when I was kind of looking at them. I had another question that's kind of like a basic question I think a lot of people would have coming into Ethereum, and that is kind of, they hear these terms like layer 2 and ETH2, and they're not the same.
No.
And kind of what is the difference, and maybe in like kind of a high overview kind of explanation, how do you think about like what is layer 2 and what is ETH2? Yeah.
This is great. So the problem is that ETH2 is created to address the scaling problem, right? Like regular Ethereum, but there's two things. Ethereum, one relies on proof of work, and environmentally speaking, it's not all that amazing, and also not that efficient. The proof of stake is much more efficient. But we can get into how that works. But if you want a kind of a nice mental model of the difference between layer 2s and ETH2 is, imagine you are at a department store, right? And there's only one cashier. And there's a lot of people that want to check out, right? At some point you get frustrating, but if it's a product that's in high demand, people are willing to wait. At some point, there might even be a secondary market, a market where people say, hey, I'll pay to get in front of you because I really want it.
Yeah,
right?
Apple Store.
Exactly. Like an Apple Store drop, and there's one cashier only. And it's like, this is huge line, right? It's like, oh man, they should really do something about this. Well, ETH 2 is they're opening up more cashiers, right? They're opening up 64 of them, right? So what they're going to do is each cashier, you can think of it as a shard, right? The regular ETH guy with like the first employee of this Apple Store, it's like, hey, you're doing a great job. We're going to put you now as one of the 64 different cashiers, and there'll be more cashiers to help you out, right? So the ultimate goal of ETH 2 is to have a bunch of cashiers that are able to process transactions. Hey, welcome to Apple. Here you go. Hey, welcome. And then that, then eventually the prices go down. People are not playing the secondary game, cutting in front of each other and paying each other, pushes the fees down, right? So that's sharding, right? More cashiers. Rollups would be like different types of cashiers. Let's say you're in a supermarket and there's the express aisle, right? Self-checkout, and then like more involved things, right? So there'll be different types of like chains for different types of use cases, right? And some of them, like if it's just like self-checkout, it'll be kind of quick, but you won't be able to buy certain things, right? Some of them are going to be, very quick, but like, or actually a little slower, but you'll be able to like, buy like bigger things or whatever. So the idea is that depending on the checkout line that you have, checkout aisle that you have, it's not, I guess, a different type of layer two. The thing is that they all anchor. Imagine if like the cashier lines, the 64 cashier lines, that's ETH 2, right?
Okay.
And each one of those little cashier stations could be either a version of Ethereum, right? Like a Ethereum shard, or something that anchors onto to Ethereum, right? Like Polygon or something like that settles on there. Now you can have like layer twos on layer twos, right?
Yeah.
Think about it like a side street. Another way to think about it, it's like the main avenue, there's a McDonald's and there's a pharmacy. Too many people are going there. Let's build a side street and put a McDonald's and a pharmacy there. Okay, that's good. Now it's starting to fill up again. You can put another side street now, right? So now you're like in the side street of a side street,
Yeah.
maybe a little less safe, but for the most part, if you're not carrying a lot of money, you're okay, right? Now if you want to like carry a whole lot of money, you can go to like, the center of Main Street and in your town and go into the big bank and do big things. If you're doing little things, going to the tchotchke store, you can go to the side street. So that's how I would describe it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to think about it.
Side streets.
I mean, I'm sure that at some points it might start to fall apart, but it's still a great way to start approaching it, to start to try to understand it.
Yeah. If you want to go from a technical perspective, it's you could always, the great thing about blockchains, you can look at it from an economic perspective or a technical perspective. Ethereum is a settlement layer, right? The layer twos it has the most amount of decentralization, the most amount of hash power. So it can guarantee the most amount of economic security because there's a lot of eyes on it. Layer twos, you can't do a lot of things on it. You're not going to like buy bubblegum on there. Layer twos will allow you to basically, it has less economic security, but you're able to have faster throughput. And if you don't really mind sacrificing the centralization, you can get a lot of things done faster and eventually settle on Ethereum too, if you need like a high level of security.
What will it look like for the average kind of MetaMask user who's not a developer, who's kind of not super into Web3, when they have to kind of make these decisions in the future?
Yeah.
Will it be automatic for them? Will they not even know about this?
I hope that we believe a lot in consent, right? So you should know, make it's a nice trade-off between like not burdening the user with it's a UX and UI problem, right? Not burdening the user with too much information, but giving them just the right information so they can take the right decision, right? It's almost like going to a doctor. The doctor will tell you A or B, and then tells you the information to make the right decision for yourself, right? For MetaMask is the same way. It's the UX UI problem, but ideally, the ideal world would be that you can just sign into a chain, right, or interact with a chain, and not necessarily have to know which one you're dealing with, essentially, right? That would be a nice world. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of UX UI research. We desperately need UX UI researchers. If you are interested in this, the blockchain space is a burgeoning place for you to solve problems just like this, right? So like, maybe there could be some sort of interface where it shows you the level of economic security and what you want to do. And you say, okay, I'm in this area, and then it sets it up for you, right? We also don't want to necessarily be the kingmaker, since we're a very popular wallet. We really don't want to like say, hey, use this chain or use that chain. You should figure out what chain you want in some ways, but it's an open UX UI problem, I think. And designing things that give people the right amount of information that they can consent to make the best decision for them. That's kind of our goal, to always put the power back in the user.
So Merrick asked, do you think there will be an option to run Ethereum app on other blockchains in the future?
Yes, it exists today. So Ethereum, the Ethereum network is one instance of the Ethereum virtual machine. Imagine if you have a virtual machine with Ubuntu on it, or Arc, Linux or whatever, or like Red Hat, and then you spin up another virtual machine on top of that, but you change up certain parameters, more memory, less of this, less that. That's basically what it is, right? So you can run, so Polygon is actually EVM based, right? Optimism is EVM based. There's a bunch of chains that are based on Ethereum. Binance Smart Chain is actually based on Ethereum. They just change certain configurations to speed things up and make certain compromises. So you can migrate Ethereum applications onto different chains today, actually. So yeah, now running an Ethereum application on, let's say, like Solana, well, not Solana, you can port over Solidity code on there, and it's kind of like doing it, but not really. But let's say something like if Monero eventually gets some sort of ability to run smart contracts, which maybe there is at some point in the works, I'm not sure. But going over to do that, it may be a little different because the virtual machine is a little different. The opcodes are different, and it's going to require a lot of the lock-in, I think, in Ethereum is the fact that, and this is not by design, it's just the way the technology works. Somebody will figure this out, is that what you write in the code and what gets compiled requires a lot of security and eyes on it, right? It's like sometimes you can have logic errors, but like writing something high level and then translating, we take this for granted. Like if we write like C or JavaScript or whatever, it gets converted into some other intermediary language and then into like machine language, and it kind of works, right? With Solidity, you have to make sure that you have to be extra careful just in case. It's almost like writing C than it is writing JavaScript in a sense. So you want to make sure that what you're getting is what you're getting. We're figuring out how to do that very efficiently at EVM-based machines. To then add extra layer of complexity for things that are on EVM-based machines is expensive. So companies like to not waste a lot of money, so they focus on what works.
Are there any other languages to write smart contracts within Ethereum?
Yeah, Viper, if you like Python. Yule, I forget what Yule looks like. There was one that looked like this, but it was LLL. But Viper and Python and Solidity, the most popular ones. Yep. So yeah, so is it Yule? Is that? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is Yule. I'm gonna pull up Viper too.
Yeah, Viper's based on it takes a lot of inspiration from Python. So if you like working with Python on the back end, Viper is a great thing for you. There's no inheritance, unfortunately, at least in this version. But it's pretty cool. A lot of leading projects use it, and it's pretty straightforward. It's clean,
And Solidity has the most features?
I would say is the most sophisticated language out there for smart contract programming. There's also on different chains, Rust. You can use like a more restricted version of Rust, because Rust has an ownership model that really lends well itself to like the concept of addresses. So for Solana, Rust, or for Near Protocol, Rust is really good. Rust is just a general really cool language to learn. You can also use it to like, compile into WebAssembly. I'm a big fan of Rust.
And then isn't like Cardano Haskell?
Yeah, it's based on something like Haskell. It's like Plutus.
Yeah, Plutus. That's all right. Yeah, that's right.
Nah, but I mean, they're both the same to me in the sense that it's like Haskell's impenetrable. So this is like another, this made my bias showing, but I know Haskell's a beautiful language. It's just, it's hard to understand in some ways. So I think there was a specific design decision by the folks at Ethereum Foundation to have languages that look like something you already use to help with onboarding, right? So like JavaScript is very popular. So, Solidity is based on a lot of the ideas from the ECMAScript standard. Python is very popular. So they made something that looked like Python Viper to help you onboard, because it's hard enough to understand the other stuff. The syntax should be in a close approximation, I think.
So I have a question for Dina. Guys, I'm trying to come up with as many questions as I can because you guys are still hanging around, and I know you guys must have some questions.
Please ask questions, please.
But yes, so either you can just open your mic, and whenever I shut up, you can say something. But Dina, considering how long that you've kind of been into Web3 and kind of where you're at, what is the next thing that maybe you don't understand or you're trying to tackle, or kind of what is the what's the next part of the technology that you're trying to learn, if that makes any sense?
Well, definitely still wrapping my head around Solidity, right? I just wrote one smart contract so far. I just wrote, one massive test file basically, but definitely writing like more robust, like impenetrable, and
how
pretty
long
much
writing Solidity?
Contract.
How long?
About like 3 months, honestly.
Okay.
3 months. But like eventually at some point, I'm gonna want to get into auditing, and that would help me understand even more, like, because smart contracts, they've always terrified me. They've always terrified me for how easily they can be exploited. And sometimes even if it's not exploiting it, if it's not that, then it is sometimes the simplest mistake, just a typo that can really, really be very damaging. So
yeah, in JavaScript, you write a typo, your UI freaks out. But in Solidity, if you write a typo, someone loses millions of dollars potentially.
that's catastrophic.
Or gets millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love doing is kind of tackling a new language, whether it was TypeScript or C# at one point in time, and kind of learning all the nuances of the programming languages. So probably about a month or two ago was the first time I started really kind of watching a lot of fundamentals videos and videos on like all the different types, and kind of just all the kind of introduction to Solidity videos that I could find. And I love that part of it, but I'm getting to a point right now where, like, okay, now it's time to write some code. Now it's time to start writing some tests. And I really do like the fact that it is that you really have to get things right, because I like to be the type of programmer who doesn't move on until something's fully tested out. I don't always get the ability to do that as a front-end developer, but I feel like this allows me to kind of build a front-end application for the most part, and still have a chunk of it that I can kind of focus on kind of writing really solid code, and writing lots of tests, and that kind of being, I felt like it's always easier to write tests around backend code and utilities and stuff like that. And like kind of this gives me that opportunity. So I get to have kind of like the best of both worlds. And so I'm kind of really excited about Solidity for that reason. It's like one more piece I get to put into the applications that I build, where I get to focus on that kind of thing. And I like going back and forth. I can work on this for a while, and then when I get kind of tired of it, I can move on to, like, to me, building front ends and UI and stuff is, I can almost do it with music playing, watching a TV show. It's kind of like, I don't have to think about anything. But with Solidity, you have to turn everything off, or I do right now, and really focus on what I'm doing. So yeah, kind of gives me both of those things.
Yeah, it's the thing that gives me confidence is just the testing. It's great. The testing and learning about fuzzing and going a little bit deeper into,
Can you
like,
tell us about fuzzing?
Yeah. So again, it's like throwing spaghetti at a wall, or like, like a shotgun of spaghetti, and seeing what sticks to make sure that you cover all the bases. Imagine if you're painting a canvas, and instead of kind of just like getting a large like roller and then kind of doing the middle, I'm like, okay, most of it's good. You're like just like doing like a Rothko and just throwing paint at it, throwing paint until you cover the whole canvas and you mostly got it. So in some ways it's like that, except that you can't really see the canvas. You know, so that's why I was like, well, why don't you just have a roller? I was like, yeah, but you don't know how big the canvas is, right? So that's fuzzing. If you want like a visual picture.
Is this is a term that I've never heard before? Is this a testing term? Is it specific to Solidity and kind of yes, smart contracts, or is this something that, because again, I've done a lot of testing in my day. I've been developing for 20 years almost, and I've never heard this word. I've heard like fuzzy searching and on databases and stuff, but this seems different.
Yeah, it's I first came across it in the blockchain world, and I was like, what is it? But it helps. It's kind of good that you can throw something randomly at it, and if it works, you can throw a lot of random things at it, and if it works, then you can have a really good close approximation to like what it is. Because like, you know, in your test, you may have like, you may ignore the corner cases, but fuzzing really gets the edges, you know, when you're doing your Rothko stuff. So I've heard it the first time only in blockchain, but maybe it's just a term that exists in computer science. But
would
I
it
think
be
the first time
analogous to kind of like when I used to build UIs and React applications and components and stuff? I used to work at Tesla, and we had this really solid QA department.
Yep.
And when we would finish our stuff, they would go around and just do everything wrong and try to break everything and poke around in places they weren't supposed to. Is that kind of like the idea, or is it?
Yep, exactly. But imagine if like a robot's doing it. And there's different types of fuzzing engines, and each one of them has a benefit, like a strength and a weakness. So you can use something like Scribble that I posted before, and Scribble is sort of like you know how you have like it's basically almost like a markup language on top of Solidity that lets you say this is exactly what I mean, right? There's no ambiguity to it, right? And then when you pass it through the different fuzzers, there isn't that disconnect. So you get exactly what you mean, and you're able to test the contract to make sure it boils down to that. Now, that's one of the things I want to learn. Because again,
so
like
it's just a term.
Yeah.
It's just, okay. It's okay. I got you. All right. That makes sense. Kind of like when I used to build databases and we'd have these tables that would keep track of IDs from one table and another table. And some people would call them hinge tables. Some people would call them associative tables. Some, like, there's all these different terms. And so, yeah, it's just a term that maybe not everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I first came across it in the blockchain space, because I guess when you're dealing with, like, essentially, imagine you had to write a JavaScript file that holds millions of dollars. You know, it's like 300 lines, but can hold $100 million. You kind of want to like look at it as much as possible. And that was like, I think honestly, that was the biggest mental hurdle for me, I think, as a developer, is to kind of like be like, oh geez, like it's a lot of responsibility here, right? You want to be accountable to everyone. At least me, I like being accountable to like, you know, even if it's random people on the internet, I don't want people to lose their savings or anything like that, or any amount of money. But if the thing that made me feel very comfortable was, again, a lot of testing, any sort of new testing framework that comes out there, fuzzing, tools like Scribble, tools like MythX, which is an automated service for that. It's almost like a linter. It's like having like a junior level smart contract auditor writing shotgun with you to kind of like, right?
Okay.
Like, hey, watch this. And it's like, oh, okay. Oh, thanks, man. You know, so it really helps have that sort of like type of linter type style thing where it checks for like the common errors. It's a lot like writing C in a sense, right? And now we have like programming languages that kind of deal with those issues that C used to have. I see Solidity evolving though to deal with a lot of these things, and a lot of tools to help with that. So I'm really, that's something I am looking more and more into, that and understanding the EVM, which is a whole another level. And then there's these, so that you can abstract, you can go down the stack with blockchain is amazing. And then you can get these like patterns. And one pattern is like the governance pattern or bonding curve, right? That's a pattern that exists. Or especially, so check out Austin Griffith's talk tomorrow. His scaffold.eth, it's going to be amazing. He's going to like go high level and low level and every level. I put a lot of his resources in the
Yeah.
readme. But the pattern, like the bonding curve and what a bonding curve is pretty interesting because it's just like this generic pattern that allows you to create automatic markets without a counterparty. So you can like.
Well, I was just going to say that. So if anyone in the call does not know what Scaffold ETH is, it is basically a repository out there that's got a bunch of branches in it. And you can kind of go on all the different branches are all of these different patterns, or potentially even kind of some of them are patterns and some of them are like apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or decentralized applications. So yeah, one of them is like the bonding curve. So you can go check this out. And like, again, some of them are patterns and it's a smaller amount of code than others. And it's like just some contracts. And then others is like, you know, it's an NFT marketplace. So there's all these different branches, and it's just so cool to kind of open this thing up and just start switching branches and checking stuff out and reading the readmes on each of them. Very cool.
Yeah. So here's like the economics intersects with like the computer science, and it allows you to create essentially a vending machine where people can trade, and you need to have a counterparty. Like in traditional finance, if I'm trying to sell something, I need somebody to actually buy it from me, right?
Yeah.
But with the blockchain, right, with Ethereum, you can basically have this like vending machine that not only can sell you things but buys things back. And if you, which is like a next level concept. Wait, I can sell to the vending machine, not only buy from the vending machine. Like,
Yeah.
You know, and the vending machine, how does the vending machine make money? Well, there's a spread between like the sell and the sell price and the buy price. And you just have these two little bonding curves, and all of a sudden you have a completely new business model that never existed. And that's that spread. And it's literally just two lines of code.
Well, they've existed. They just haven't been in the hands of everyone.
Yes.
The way that things are now.
Yeah, it's not at the garage level. So Ethereum lets you do a lot of sophisticated things from your garage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah.
It's really what the internet was supposed to be. And this sounds so cliche, but it kind of is. You know, one of the reasons that I wanted to move into Web3, obviously I'm very interested in it. I'm about as interested in Web3 as I was in like responsive design back in 2013. And the job that I was at just wasn't like, I had all these things that I wanted to explore and learn more about. And my job basically said, no, you have to focus on just this little lane right here. And you can do anything in there that you want to, but you can't explore other things unless you want to do that on your weekend time. So, and of course, you could get into a Web3 job where you're focusing on one thing. But I think that a lot of people are finding that the different opportunities in Web3 out there are allowing them to kind of explore the way that they want to, because usually the companies that are hiring they kind of understand that, and that's kind of how they work anyways. So I think that's really awesome.
The upside of having an industry that there's only a few business models is that everyone's looking for a new business model. So they'll let you try something out and see if it sticks. Yeah. Consensus is that when it says we have a great business, we have several business models that are working for us, but culturally speaking too, it's sort of like everyone's treated like an adult. Everyone's works remote, you know, it's like, hey, do your work, that's cool. Hey, you want to try something new? Even better, because the space is moving really quickly. So try something new. In fact, I think everyone is encouraged to try something new. We have internal hackathons all the time just to see what is possible, right? Because it's like virgin territory, it's California and the Wild West, man. And, you know, we just got here and everything is beautiful, you know, and pristine. I estimate 1800s, 1900s, or New York City is 1600, you know, whatever, like, you know, New Amsterdam. But like it's everything needs to be built out. This is
Biddle Giddle.
Yeah, so there's like a guild. That's a popular term.
This is another Austin project, correct?
Yeah, he's a Prometheus. He's a Promethean character. He goes and builds amazing things, and that's
another cool one is ETH Build. If anyone hasn't seen that, it's like it's like, what is it, that program for kids, Sketch?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
but it's like for adults on the blockchain. It's so cool.
Yep. So basically plug and play and figure out how the EVM works. I would say start here before you read like mastering Ethereum. And if you want to know how blockchains work in general, there's this good thing that I posted in there by Anders Brownworth. And and it just shows you like what a hash is. A lot of these things, honestly, it's easy to learn just by playing around with them in visual demos like this. And then most of it is just intuition. Once you kind of get the intuition down, it's enough to like be a decent developer. Very good developer, actually. So like this creates an excellent intuition for how the different pieces kind of work. And that's just amazing. We just did this and then.
Yeah. This is the thing that when I saw this, this is almost the thing that made me want to stop what I was doing and kind of get into Web3, because for the first time I was able to visually kind of understand what's going on when my wallet's creating a mnemonic for me, and kind of how the QR, like what the QR code kind of connects to, and all these weird things. It was just, you know, and I know a lot of these things. I know how QR codes work. I used to work, I built an application and then for Tesla, where they would scan things that had QR codes on them, and we would, you know, put them in the database, obviously. But it's just so cool to kind of like, you can go through the menus and you can find kind of little different projects and open them up and see how everything's works and poke around and change things and see how it affects the other pieces, which was really cool.
Yeah. So the great thing about Web3 is that there is jobs for community builders, jobs for DevRel, jobs for developers, jobs for UX researchers, jobs. We're building like this whole internet native infrastructure, almost like a whole nation. And it's like, hey, come on down, man. You know, if you can do something, come on down. There's a need for you. Even people who write really good, like, you know, like great readmes, right? Or you know, public relations, everything is necessary, I think. It's very different than in 2018 when it was mostly just protocol devs. You know, now it's sort of like we've crossed the mainstream, you know, and you know, artists can find the space here, everybody. So whatever skill that you have that you want to combine with tech, or whatever passion that you have that you want to combine with tech, I think Web3, either you can build a DAO around it and create treasury around it, right? Or you can like work in an actual organization and collaborate with people. So the same way you can create really niche communities, right? Back in the day with GeoCities, and now, right, with Facebook groups or whatever other places, right? And share really niche ideas, feel connected around the world with people in niche communities. You can do the same thing, but then also make money from it and have value from it, right? Back in the day it was ad model. Now there's other models. So imagine if every Reddit had a treasury. So that's the power of Web3. Every subreddit having a treasury, but there isn't a central intermediary, and everything's interoperable.
You know, and Reddit kind of already has rules around each of its different communities. It just doesn't have the other things that like Web3 and the blockchain has. But it's a good analogy.
Yeah. So that's if you are part of some sort of subreddit or some sort of subgroup or some sort of subculture, there's a place for you here, especially this early on. So yeah, if you like economics, if you like politics, if you like programming, if you like UX UI, if you like snowmobiles, you probably create a snowmobile DAO. I mean, it's like, there's like everything and anything. You just have to kind of go out there and build it with people, but there's somebody there on the other side. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. The last, I guess, call to action is feel free to ask questions. If you have any questions you want to continue the conversation, it's a nice experiment. Open an issue on this repo. Share this repo with friends. Add resources to this repo. Change things up. We're accepting pull requests. You know, we'll be a pull request shop. Send a pull request. We'll submit it. Get your first pull request into a Web3 project. This could, our hope is that this can turn into like this little project into other projects, a community that where we can build things together. And it's a great kind of like funnel to send you to different places. If you have a question, hey, I'm into this, who do I talk to? Open an issue. I'm trying to build this. Here's a question. It may not be related to the repo. Open an issue. Just open an issue on that repo, no matter what it is, we'll answer it. And that's
Okay.
it.
Yeah, just wanted to mention before we kind of leave here today that Consensus and Metamask are both sponsoring ETH Dubai, which is going to be the Ethereum conference in Dubai. So everyone check that out. You can go, let me go ahead and pull this up real quick so I know. I'm going to post the link in here. It's ethdubaiconf.org, and I'm going to post that into the chat. And, you know, so long as the world cooperates, I am planning on being there. And yeah, just wanted to mention that as well. Oh, I had one other thing I wanted to say. Dang it. Do you guys have anything you want to say in closing?
Don't be afraid to experiment and fail. There's a community out there for you. Join a meetup. If you want, it just takes one little toehold somewhere, and you can definitely kind of like get into this brand new world. Open an issue on the repo, honestly. Try the repo out, start going through the resources. If something worked, feedback is always nice. If something didn't work, there's going to be things that don't work. Open an issue. I think I intentionally left certain things not to work to inspire people to say, hey, this doesn't work. Why? Let's have a conversation. I'm more than happy to give my time to very interested people, especially the React community, especially the European community. That's been a source of a lot of the things that I enjoy in life, including the thing that wanted to get me into community organizing. Shout out to the family, the VC fund. So yeah, that's my my final thing.
And also, if you're going to buy tickets to ETH Dubai, do it when the price of Ethereum is super low, because you can buy in ETH right here. That's how you buy the tickets. Very cool. And this was actually the first kind of real world app that I had an ability to kind of test out with Patrick and kind of look at the code that he was writing in the contracts. Kind of helped me understand Solidity, but not also that, but also how kind of this technology fits into a web application and how it's deployed and how it's tested and all of that kind of stuff. So it was very, very cool to do this. But yeah, check out ETH Dubai Conf. I want to say thank you to the Consensus and MetaMask team. You guys are awesome. It'd be nice, you know, maybe if I could work there someday. And then anybody else who might be wanting to get into Web3, you know, talk to these guys. They're very nice, and I'm sure they can point you in the right direction, whether it's with them or with someone else. You know, it seems like in the Web3 community that it's less about kind of competition. It's more about kind of everyone working together. So I found it very open, and hopefully you guys have learned a lot here today. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It's been great.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Save the email, reach out to me, anthony.albertori@consensus.net. Seriously, ask me any question. I'll answer you in about a day or so. Unless it's the weekend, 2 days. Just ask away. I'm very, very happy that you gave me the opportunity to speak with you, and open an issue on the repo, please. Even if you tell me it sucks, it's okay. Let's start the conversation, please. We think it's good. We think it's a good repo.
And thank you to Dina.
No, thank you. So super thrilled to be here, actually.
Awesome. Yeah, this is where it's at. React is where it's at. And then next it's Web3 is where it's at. And this conference has both of these conference organizers have all that covered. So awesome. All right, guys.
We're hiring. Check out consensus.net careers. We're hiring a lot of React devs, JavaScript developers, React Native developers. So check us out. See ya.
All right. See you later, everybody.